Chapter 7:15. In the end, Guhan still rejected fleeting wooden fish. From a rational point of view, agreeing to fleeting wooden fish was the best decision for Guhan. Not only could he obtain the severed black hair and cut off his and Ju's scars, but he could also quickly rush to Beijing to coordinate with the king of Yu, Go Jian. The only price for this was marrying Rina Takasaka. This was not a loss at all. On the contrary, he could even make a lot of money. Not only would he get the Phantom Valley cigarette box worth 10 billion, but he could also form a marriage alliance with the Fleeting family. When Guhan heard Rina Takasaka address Fleeting Wooden Fish as her grandfather, and although Fleeting Wooden Fish's attitude towards Rina Takasaka was a little cold, his words implied that he was related to Rina Takasaka. Putting everything else aside, just this alone was enough to make countless people agree to this, even if they had to sharpen their heads. This was something that they could not even dream of getting. And so, this was directly presented to Guhan. If it was the Guhan from 4 months ago, the Guhan who stabbed Kunzu for the king of Yu, then Guhan would definitely agree to this deal. This was something that had hundreds of benefits and no harm. But for the current Guhan, this was a difficult decision. If he agreed to this deal, not to mention anything else, just a few people would definitely be heartbroken. More importantly, he was Guhan, a man who was determined to become Jendi. If he used his own future to reach a compromise, then what future did Guhan have? Therefore, Guhan rejected the Fleeting Time Wooden Fish. He didn't say anything else to the Fleeting Time Wooden Fish, nor did he look at the green silk sword again. He left the room and left Flowing Time Mountain without looking back. On the way back from Fleeting Time Mountain to Beijing, Guhan kept thinking about what to do next. It was also at this time that Fleeting Wooden Fish suddenly sent Guhan a message. The message was very simple. From beginning to end, it only told him one thing. That was, Ku Rokin had already defeated LV Hao, and obtained the qualifications to synchronize with the king of Yu Go Jian. However, because of the Lionian clan's interference, he would be delayed for another hour or so. If Guhan couldn't reach the Sword Pavilion in Yangjing City within an hour, the king of Yu, Go Jian, would coordinate with Ku Rokin. Although he did not know why Fleeting Wooden Fish would send him such a message, even though his negotiations with the Liunian family had fallen apart, Fleeting Wooden Fish did not know why. However, one thing was clear: the Liunian family would not give him false information. He only had an hour to change everything. Time did not allow Guhan to drag it out any longer. Ku Rokin was almost certain that he would be able to coordinate King Yu's Go Jian sword. Once he succeeded, he would only have 2 options. Either give up on King Yu forever, or kill Ku Rokin. Either option was unacceptable to Guhan. That was why Guhan had to think of a way to stop Ku Rokin from touching King Yu's Go Jian sword. After thinking for a long time, Guhan finally thought of a way to deal with the current situation. Since he couldn't get the green silk severing sword for the time being, he had to think of a way to control King Yu's Go Jian sword. If Guhan couldn't coordinate with him, he couldn't let others do it either. Yuzhang City's Sword Pavilion was under Guhan's control. Guhan had ways to make Ku Rokin not even see King Yu's Go Jian sword. Originally, Guhan planned to barge into the Sword Pavilion and snatch King Yu's Go Jian sword into his dimensional pocket. Then, he would discuss the deal with the pavilion master he had met in Yangjing City. But what Guhan didn't expect was that Sword Immortal Tian Han would be right next to King Yu's Go Jian sword. Moreover, he was standing with Ku Rokin. This caused Guhan's plan to fail. At the moment, Guhan didn't have the ability to snatch the sword mistress from an immortal sword tier sword wielder. If he couldn't snatch it, then there was nothing he could do. Guhan could only negotiate with Sword Immortal Tian Han in front of Ku Rokin. But Guhan was confident that Sword Immortal Tian Han wouldn't reject him once he saw his conditions. On the other hand, hearing Guhan's words, Ku Rokin was shocked. This Guhan actually wanted to trade King Yu's Go Jian sword back to Yuzhang City? Then, what was all his hard work for? He could just wait for Guhan to trade King Yu's Go Jian sword into his hands, and then find him to negotiate. But what exactly did Guhan want to trade for King Yu's Go Jian sword? This sword was a famed sword mistress left behind by Kunzu. Its status was even higher than that of a spirit sword mistress. It had reached the level of an immortal sword mistress. How could sword immortal Tian Han trade King Yu's Go-Gen sword to Gu Han? Trade? What a joke. Sword immortal Tian Han humphed coldly. Who do you think you are, the previous sword pavilion master of Yuzhang City? What right do you have to negotiate with me? You're just an ordinary famed sword wielder. You don't have the right to negotiate with me. Then we'll wait. Very soon, someone who has the right to negotiate with sword immortal Tian Han will come, Gu Han replied. The person who had the right to negotiate was naturally his disciple, Lu Shihua. The moment he entered Yangjing City, Gu Han had already ordered Lu Shihua to rush to Yangjing City's sword pavilion immediately. He knew that sword immortal Tian Han would make things difficult for him. Gu Han, can we talk about your deal later? Sword immortal Tian Han has already promised me to negotiate with King Yu's Go-Gen sword. If I fail, you can discuss the trade later. How about that? Ku Rokin became anxious when he heard that they had to wait for someone to negotiate with. He was only one step away from obtaining King Yu's Go-Gen sword. He didn't want to wait another minute. Wait. Your matter can wait. When I'm done with sword immortal Tian Han, I'll discuss this with you. Gu Han turned his head and said to Ku Rokin with a complicated expression. Ku Rokin opened his mouth, but no words came out. Hee. I think this Yuzhang dude has a point. Since the person who wants to negotiate with me hasn't arrived yet, I might as well let him try first. If he succeeds, then wouldn't King Yu's Go-Gen sword belong to your Yuzhang city? When that happens, you'll have more confidence to negotiate with me. After saying this, sword immortal Tian Han winked at Ku Rokin and purposely pushed King Yu's Go-Gen sword towards Ku Rokin. That's right. Sword immortal Tian Han has a point. Gu Han, let me try first. You can talk after I'm done. As he said this, Ku Rokin was about to touch King Yu's Go-Gen sword. Looks like I'll have to shed all pretense of cordiality first. Gu Han was exasperated. He definitely couldn't let Ku Rokin touch King Yu's Go-Gen sword. Just as he was about to stop Ku Rokin, he suddenly heard a commotion from downstairs. Then, he heard Lu Shihua's shrill shout. Master, I'm here. Master, your disciple is here. At this crucial moment, Lu Shihua finally arrived. Hearing Lu Shihua's voice, Ku Rokin thought for a moment, then retracted his hand that was reaching for King Yu's Go-Gen sword. Let go. Let go of me. My master told me to come. Lu Shihua shouted from downstairs. Clearly, the staff downstairs had asked Lu Shihua to stop. Lu Shihua was just an ordinary person right now. Any sword-bearers could stop her. Let her come up. She's the Yuzhang City Sword Court's pavilion master. Are you going to let her down? Sword immortal Tian Han said sarcastically from upstairs. The staff downstairs let go of Lu Shihua's body, allowing Lu Shihua to jog up to the third floor. You're the Yuzhang City Sword Court's pavilion master? The sword spirit of Tian Hen circled around Lu Shihua, looking at her body from head to toe. Lu Shihua felt a chill run down her spine. Sword immortal Tian Han continued, I thought pavilion master Lu Shihua was a great beauty. Otherwise, pavilion master Gu Han wouldn't have fallen in love with you. He actually passed the position of Yuzhang City Sword Court's pavilion master to you. Now, it seems that I've really misunderstood pavilion master Gu Han. Sword immortal Tian Han's words were clearly mocking Gu Han for passing the position of Sword Court's pavilion master to Lu Shihua because he was infatuated with Lu Shihua's beauty. These words caused Lu Shihua's entire face to turn red. Senior Sword immortal Tian Han, you're also a senior of the human race. You should be careful when you speak without evidence. Gu Han replied bluntly. Forget it. Your Yuzhang City Sword Court's affairs have nothing to do with me. I just want to know what this pavilion master Lu Shihua wants to trade with me. The two of you better not joke around with me. Otherwise, even if you're both Yuzhang City Sword Court's pavilion masters, you'll still have to pay a few layers of skin before you leave. Who asked the Yuzhang City Sword Court's pavilion masters to be so worthless? Sword immortal Tian Han was constantly mocking Gu Han and the Yuzhang City Sword Court. Don't worry. It's fine as long as senior sword immortal Tian Han doesn't ask us to trade with you. Gu Han replied coldly. Sword Immortal Tien Han didn't take Guhan's words to heart. He didn't believe that Guhan would take out something he couldn't refuse to trade with him. Even if the item he took out was indeed more valuable than the Yu King Gojen sword, Sword Immortal Tien Han was a man of integrity. He had made up his mind that he wouldn't trade with Guhan. He was going to anger Guhan to death. Senior Sword Immortal Tien Han, please take a look. I wonder if this item is to your liking. Guhan suddenly pulled out a long sword from his dimensional pocket. This long sword was completely golden, and there were extremely complicated and strange patterns carved on it. What kind of *T is this? Sword Immortal Tien Han wanted to say what kind of *T it was, but when he saw the strange patterns, he couldn't take his eyes off it. Suddenly, Sword Immortal Tien Han took out a magnifying glass from his dimensional pocket. He threw himself in front of Guhan without a care for his image. He grabbed the golden long sword in Guhan's hand with one hand, and raised the magnifying glass with the other. He carefully examined every detail of the golden long sword. After examining it for a whole 20 minutes, he stood up in a daze. The Yu King Gojen sword is yours. But this sword belongs to the Yangjing City Sword Court, Sword Immortal Tien Han said with a sigh of relief. Chapter 716. Sword Immortal Tien Han couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart. He tried to snatch the golden long sword from Guhan's hand. However, just as Sword Immortal Tien Han exerted some force, he discovered that his hand was empty. The golden long sword had disappeared without a trace. Guhan had probably placed it back into his dimensional pocket. Guhan, what are you trying to do? Are you going to go back on your word? Sword Immortal Tien Han snapped. It was as if Guhan had stolen his entire family's fortune. Sword Immortal Tien Han, who had just decided to reject all of Guhan's offers, was now extremely eager to obtain the golden longsword. Even if Guhan asked him to squat on the ground and bark like a dog, Sword Immortal Tien Han would probably reconsider whether or not to agree to Guhan's conditions. I'm sure everyone has already guessed that the golden longsword Guhan was offering was the Emperor sword, the Shenyuan sword, that Yi Qing had given to Guhan. Since ancient times, no sword pavilion lord had been able to resist the temptation of an Emperor sword. If he could add a Jendi to his sword pavilion, then even if he had to give up his life for it, this sword pavilion lord would never regret it. Moreover, Sword Immortal Tien Han only needed to pay the price of a famed sword maiden in exchange for an Emperor sword maiden forever. He wouldn't come across such a good deal even after 500 years. How could Sword Immortal Tien Han not agree? Just as Guhan had said, what he was most afraid of was Guhan going back on his word. He didn't want this deal to go through. I, Guhan, am a man of my word. I won't go back on my word. Guhan pursed his lips. Sword Immortal Tien Han was no longer the one with the upper hand in this deal, but himself. Of course, Guhan had to take advantage of him. Where's the Yu King Gojen sword? If you don't give me the Yu King Gojen sword, how can I give you the Shenyuan sword? This really is the Shenyuan sword. Sword Immortal Tien Han became even more excited upon hearing Guhan reveal the name of the Shenyuan sword. Just now, he could sense the immense power within the sword and ascertain that it was undoubtedly an Emperor sword. However, Sword Immortal Tien Han wasn't sure which Emperor sword it was, even though he could vaguely sense that it was the Shenyuan sword based on the patterns on the sword. Sword Immortal Tien Han knew about this sword. When he had just become an immortal sword wielder, he had gone to see Hao Tian Jendi. Then, Hao Tian Jendi had told Sword Immortal Tien Han everything that had happened in Chongyang Mountain. Only now did Sword Immortal Tien Han learn that an emperor's sword had once brushed shoulders with the Yangjing sword pavilion. Moreover, it was the legendary Shenyuan sword, the #1 emperor's sword. Sword Immortal Tien Han's heart almost broke when he heard this news. He didn't think that the Shenyuan sword would deliver itself to him at a time like this. Guhan, what are you doing? Hearing the Shenyuan sword's name, Ku Rokin jumped up. He grabbed Guhan's hand and said agitatedly, Guhan, are you crazy? You want to use the Shenyuan sword to trade for the Yu King Gojen sword. Even 100 or 1,000 Yu King Gojen swords can't compare to a single Shenyuan sword. You actually want to use it for a trade? You must be crazy. This deal doesn't count. Of course, Ku-Rokin knew that Guhan would suffer a great loss from this trade. No, it was Yuzhang City that would suffer a great loss. As a citizen of Yuzhang City, Ku-Rokin would never allow such a ridiculous trade to take place before his eyes. This was an Empress Sword Empress, not some Spirit Sword Empress. Let go of me. I've already decided on the trade. There's no need for you to stop me. Guhan flung Ku-Rokin's hand away and said coldly, "Looks like you really are crazy. Guhan, I'm telling you, you don't have the right to make this trade." Ku-Rokin blocked in front of Guhan, "You're no longer the Sword Pavilion Master. You don't have the right to make any decisions on behalf of the Sword Pavilion. It's even more impossible for you to initiate this stupid trade. I'm going to report this to Master Liu Lei and let him stop you." Ku-Rokin, you're mistaken. This sword is mine, mine alone. It doesn't belong to Yuzhang City's Sword Pavilion. I have the right to make any decision regarding this sword. You don't have the right to interfere. Move aside. Guhan flung Ku-Rokin, who was blocking in front of him. "No. I won't allow you to do such a thing. I won't move aside even if I die." Ku-Rokin was even more thorough this time. He actually hugged Guhan's waist and buried his head in Guhan's chest. To put it bluntly, if you didn't consider the gender difference between Guhan and Ku-Rokin, they looked like two young lovers who were having an argument. Lu Shihua. Pavilion Master Lu Shihua. Although I don't approve of you becoming the Pavilion Master, since you're standing in the position of the Pavilion Master, please do your duty. Chase this crazy guy out. Don't let him use our Yuzhang City's treasure, the Shenyuan sword, as a bargaining chip. Ku-Rokin hugged Guhan. He turned his head and said to Lu Shihua, telling her to stop Guhan. Needless to say, in terms of management, Lu Shihua indeed had the right to order Ji Yuhan to end this damned deal. The reason was simple. Lu Shihua was the pavilion master of Yuzhang City's sword pavilion, while Guhan was just an ordinary sword-bearer in Yuzhang City. Moreover, this trade involved the Sword Maiden, who was under the jurisdiction of Sword Pavilion. Lu Shihua naturally had the right to order Guhan around, even though Guhan was the previous pavilion master. "Guhan, don't be stupid. Have you forgotten? Just now, Sword Immortal Tian Hen agreed to let me synchronize with the Yu King Gojian sword. Don't worry, I have full confidence that I can synchronize with the Yu King Gojian sword." Ku-Rokin moved his mouth next to Guhan's ear and bit Guhan's ear. "As long as I synchronize with the Yu King Gojian sword, it'll be the same as having the Yu King Gojian sword in Yuzhang City's hands. You'll have more than 40 years to negotiate with Yangjing City's sword pavilion. You'll be able to trade for the Yu King Gojian sword at a fair price instead of ruining the Shenyuan sword. Do you understand?" Ku-Rokin's persuasion was very well intentioned. On one hand, he tried to persuade Lu Shihua to stop Guhan. On the other hand, he helped Guhan think of a roundabout way to save the country. Unfortunately, he had no idea what Guhan was really thinking, what Guhan wanted, or what Guhan's real plan was. "Enough. Get out of my way." Sword Immortal Tian Hen finally came back to his senses. He realized that it was very likely that Zhu Luren would stop this once-in-a-lifetime deal. This deal would allow him, Sword Immortal Tian Hen, to make a great contribution. This deal would allow the Sword Pavilion of Yangjing to have its sixth Emperor sword, the Sword Mother. Sword Immortal Tian Hen was instantly enraged. He unceremoniously pushed Zhu Luren to the side. Then, Ku-Rokin, who felt as if the back of his skull had been shattered, heard Sword Immortal Tian Hen say these words to him. "Did you think I couldn't hear what you whispered to me just now? Did you think I couldn't detect your sinister plan? You want to shamelessly detain the Yu King Gojian sword in Yuzhang City and never return it to us, right? I'm telling you, stop dreaming." Sword Immortal Tian Hen humphed coldly. "Get out of my way. Get out of my way right now. I won't let you synchronize with the Yu King Gojian sword. I, Tian Hen, swear to the heavens right now. You will never touch the Yu King Gojian sword for the rest of your life. Even if you can synchronize with the Yu King Gojian sword successfully, it will be nothing but a dream. Just wait in your dreams for this day to come. I. Hearing Sword Immortal Tian Hen's words, Ku Rokin felt as if his chest had been smashed by a sledgehammer that weighed several tons. He couldn't even breathe. One could only imagine the pain in Ku Rokin's heart at this moment. The Yu King Gojian sword, whom he viewed as his lifelong goal, was forever lost to him because of a single sentence from Sword Immortal Tian Hen. This was like a person's first girlfriend. Because of her father's disapproval, she would never be able to be with him. Later on, Ku Rokin wrote this in his own memoirs. At this moment, I feel like dying. If it weren't for the fact that my father's figure appeared in my mind, I would have never fulfilled my father's dream. I'm afraid that in this world, Sword Immortal Sho wouldn't exist. If someone asked me if I would hate Guhan in my heart, I would only say, F*ck them. Phew. Hearing Sword Immortal Tian Hen's words, Guhan finally let out a long sigh of relief. He didn't expect Ku Rokin to cooperate with him like this. He even offered to help him detain the Yu King Gojian sword. He wanted Sword Immortal Tian Hen to fly into a rage and forever forbid Ku Rokin from synchronizing with the Yu King Gojian sword. It wasn't easy to put on this show. It wasn't easy to make someone as smart as Guhan act like an idiot. Guhan wasn't an idiot. How could he really exchange the Shen Yuan sword for the Yu King Gojian sword? Even an idiot wouldn't do such a thing. Actually, Guhan was only putting on an act for Ku Rokin and Sword Immortal Tian Hen to see. He wanted Sword Immortal Tian Hen to say that he would never allow Ku Rokin to synchronize with the Yu King Gojian sword. As long as Sword Immortal Tian Hen said this, then Sword Immortal Tian Hen would never go back on his word. Whether it was for his face or for his own benefit, he couldn't go back on his word. Even if Ku Rokin didn't jump out to stop him, Guhan would still slowly guide Ku Rokin and Sword Immortal Tian Hen. To make Sword Immortal Tian Hen suspect Ku Rokin. Just the slightest bit of suspicion would cause Sword Immortal Tian Hen to immediately retract his agreement to allow Ku Rokin to synchronize with the Yu King Gojian sword. He would also forbid Ku Rokin and the people of Yuzhang City from ever touching the Yu King Gojian sword. In fact, he might even refuse to allow anyone to synchronize with the Yu King Gojian sword, so that Guhan could keep the Yu King Gojian sword safe until he found severed black hair. Guhan believed that Sword Immortal Tian Hen would carry out this order with unwavering determination. As long as he still had any illusions about the Shen Yuan sword, then he would definitely do it. Otherwise, if the Yu King Gojian sword was synchronized with someone else, what would he use to exchange for the Shen Yuan sword? Chapter 717. Tian Heng. How dare you injure a brother from Yuzhang City? Do you still have any sword-bearer's ancestral techniques? Guhan took advantage of the moment when Ku Rokin was slapped into the wall by Sword Immortal Tian Heng to rush over to Ku Rokin's side. Then, he pulled Ku Rokin into his arms and yelled angrily at Sword Immortal Tian Heng, Senior Sword Immortal Tian Heng, "This matter won't end so easily. It looks like we can't continue with this deal. When brother Ku Rokin recovers, we can talk about this again." After saying this, he picked up Ku Rokin and Lu Shihua's hand. He was about to leave the sword pavilion with the two of them. "You dare to talk about ancestral techniques with me? Fine, I'll have plenty of time to talk about ancestral techniques with you. Mr. Guhan, former Sword Pavilion Lord, just wait for the Sword Pavilion headquarters to issue a summons to you." Sword Immortal Tian Heng threatened. This was Yangjing City's territory. Why would he be afraid of a guy from Yuzhang City? At the same time, Sword Immortal Tian Heng handed the Yu King Gojian sword to a swordbearer behind him. Then, in a loud voice, he instructed the swordbearer, "Lock this Yu King Gojian sword on the 6th floor. Keep it with the sword empresses. Do you understand?" The 6th floor of the sword pavilion had always been used to keep sword empresses of the Yu King Gojian sword. It was heavily guarded, especially against the swordbearers. Unless the swordbearers were immortal sword tier or above, there was no way they could force their way into the 6th floor. As for immortal sword tier swordbearers, as long as they asked which sword empress they wanted to synchronize with, no city's sword pavilion could refuse them. They didn't even need to force their way into the 6th floor. No. The half-asleep Ku Rokin let out a heart-wrenching howl. He knew that Sword Immortal Tian Heng was determined to not give him a chance to synchronize with the King of Yu, Gojian Jian. Once the sword was placed on the 6th floor of the sword pavilion, unless Guhan really made a deal with the sword pavilion of Yangjing, he would never be able to see the king of Yu, Go Jian 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 Jian. Seeing this, Guhan heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Everything had gone more smoothly than he had imagined. Sword Immortal Tian Hen had actually made up his mind to hide the Go Jian sword, the king of Yu, on the 6th floor of the sword pavilion. In that case, unless Sword Immortal Tian Hen knew his true intentions, he would definitely use the Go Jian sword, the king of Yu, as a bargaining chip. Even the people of Yangjing City would not be able to communicate with the Go Jian sword, the king of Yu. This was because Sword Immortal Tian Heng never would have imagined that Guhan, who had already become a famed sword wielder, would actually want to use Azure Sever to sever the sword mistress within his body. Guhan's true goal was actually to prevent others from synchronizing with the sword of Yu King Go Jian. Once Guhan had successfully severed the Juzi sword, Guhan had plenty of ways to force Sword Immortal Tian Hen to hand over the Go Jian sword of the Yu King. Things were progressing smoothly. Guhan watched as Yu King Go Jian Jian was about to leave the 3rd level. Just as he was about to relax, something unexpected happened. "Who is it? Who hurt my father? Step out." At this moment, a young and shrill voice filled with the smell of a Lolita roared in an incomparably violent tone. Sho Sho, who had been wandering around downstairs, had somehow made her way up to the 3rd floor. When she saw her father covered in wounds and blood flowing from the corner of his mouth, she was instantly enraged. F***ck, that Yuzhong bastard really is Yuzhong bastard. He doesn't even know how to raise a child. Throw her out. Since when does our sword pavilion allow children to enter? Sword Immortal Tianheng was also filled with displeasure when he heard Sho Sho's roar at him. He immediately gave an order to another famed sword wielder beside him. The famed sword wielder immediately accepted the order and prepared to pick Sho Sho up and bring her out of the sword pavilion. "Don't touch me." Sho Sho suddenly revealed an extremely horrified expression. Then, her hair suddenly began to grow, splitting into 9 braids that shot out in all directions like a series of giant snakes. What a familiar battle scene. Seeing this, a name instinctively surfaced in Guhan's mind. He was just about to recite the name when the hair suddenly began to emit a blinding light. Crap, I can't move at all. After the light faded, Guhan discovered that he was unable to move. He couldn't even control a single hair on his body. This feeling was similar to when Guhan had become Jiyu Shen Yuan and was unable to effectively control his own body. Only Jiyu Han's consciousness was clear. Like Jiyu Han wasn't the only one who couldn't move. Lu Shihua, LV Hao, the 2 famed sword tier swordsmen, and even the mighty immortal sword tier swordsman, Sword Immortal Tian Heng, were all frozen to the spot. Their expressions were so stiff that it was almost comical. It was as if they were emoticons used in online chats. They looked like they were crying yet not crying, smiling yet not smiling, mocking yet not joking, angry yet not angry. If they could take a picture of this emoticon and post it online, it would definitely become the best emoticon of the year. Sho Sho, what are you doing? Right now, there were only 2 people who could move. One was naturally Sho Sho, who had caused all of this, and the other was Sho Sho's father, Ku Rokin. "Daddy, they're all bad people. If they dare to hurt you, Sho Sho will turn them into stone." Sho Sho jumped back onto Ku Rokin's shoulder, waving her little fists as she spoke angrily. Sho Sho had done this to avenge her father. "Sho Sho, you've made a big mistake." Ku Rokin didn't know what to say to Sho Sho. He wanted to give her a good scolding, but Sho Sho had done this for him. She had only done this out of anger after seeing him injured. At the end of the day, it was because Sho Sho loved him. Praise her, what kind of joke was this? She had turned the current Sword Tower Master of Yangjing City and Sword Tower Master of Yuzhong City into stone. This was not a small matter. It was enough for Ku Rokin to be locked up for several years. Sho Sho, will they be able to get out of their petrified state after 10 seconds? Ku Rokin asked Sho Sho as he recalled his battle with Lu Hao. Lu Hao had also been petrified. No. At that time, Sho Sho was in a good mood. She was just playing around with her opponent. Now that Sho Sho is in a bad mood, Sho Sho will turn them into stone for an hour. Let's see if they still dare to bully Daddy. Sho Sho pouted. Good heavens, she actually wanted to set a time limit for an hour. If Ku Rokin had any evil intentions, he only needed to attack once, and the Sword Tower of Yangjing City and Sword Tower of Yuzhong City would both lose their Sword Tower masters at the same time. Of course, Ku Rokin wasn't that crazy. But this also allowed Ku Rokin to see an opportunity. Because everyone was already petrified, Yu King Go Jiao Jian was left on the ground. As long as Ku Rokin walked to Yu King Go Jiao Jian and gently picked up Yu King Go Jiao Jian, then his lifelong dream would instantly come true. But if he did that, Ku Rokin would be breaking the rules of Sword Tower. When Sword Immortal Tian Hen recovered, he definitely wouldn't let Ku Rokin off. What should he do? This was a choice. If Ku Rokin stayed here and didn't move, and when Sword Immortal Tian Hen recovered, he might just accept a lighter punishment. But if Ku Rokin took the opportunity to synchronize with Yu King Go Jiao Jian, then when Sword Immortal Tian Hen recovered, he would definitely give Ku Rokin a terrible punishment. This was a very difficult choice to make. But Ku Rokin only took a second to decide. Shosho, help me up, Ku Rokin said to Shosho. And so, Shosho helped Ku Rokin free from Guhan's petrified embrace. Just like that, Guhan watched as Ku Rokin slowly left him, watched as Ku Rokin got closer and closer to Yu King Go Jiao Jian, watched as Ku Rokin and Yu King Go Jiao Jian were about to collide. It was very difficult to describe Guhan's current feelings. To put it simply, he was like a bomb that was about to explode. But his body was like a rock that couldn't explode, so what would explode was only his consciousness. After so many schemes and plots, in the end, he still didn't gamble with fate. Instead, he was toyed with by fate. This time, there was no accident, no main character aura, and no peerless expert suddenly appeared to push Ku Rokin away at the critical moment, preventing Ku Rokin from touching Yu King Go Jiao Jian. The only thing Guhan could hope for was that Ku Rokin would encounter the 10% failure rate. Even if he held Yu King Go Jiao Jian, he wouldn't be able to synchronize with Yu King Go Jiao Jian. With a very simple bending motion, Ku Rokin held Yu King Go Jiao Jian in his hand. Then, Ku Rokin's body also started to petrify. Shosho didn't glow, which meant that Ku Rokin's body was synchronized with Yu King Go Jiao Jian. Dad, what's wrong? Shosho didn't want to petrify you. Shosho didn't know about the synchronization process. So when she saw Ku Rokin petrified, she thought that she had accidentally petrified Ku Rokin as well. Petrify release. Shosho swung her hair, and everyone's petrified state was removed. Aha! Sword Immortal Tian Hong went crazy as soon as he was released from his petrified state. He had been tricked by a mere treasured sword wielder, and was petrified for a few minutes. If word of this got out, Sword Immortal Tian Hong would probably become a joke on the forums. Story. Plot. This was something that the proud Sword Immortal Tian Hong would never be able to accept. So Sword Immortal Tian Hong immediately acted. The immortal sword wielder in his hand was instantly released, and it grabbed at Shosho at lightning speed. On the other hand, Shosho seemed a little weak after everyone's petrification. Faced with the attack of an immortal sword wielder, she couldn't resist at all. She was caught by the immortal sword wielder. Turn her back into her immortal sword wielder form, then seal her. Sword Immortal Tian Hong ordered his own immortal sword wielder. This little girl isn't an immortal sword wielder. The immortal sword wielder sensed Shosho's body, then frowned. She's not human either. Could she be a Yuan Ku? Yuan Ku? How could there be a Yuan Ku in Yangjing City? Sword Immortal Tian Hong regained some of his rationality, and he exclaimed in shock. Tian Hong, what should I do with her? The immortal sword wielder asked. Then lock her up like Yuan Ku. And that Yuzhong bastard, who's in a synchronized state, capture him too and lock him up in the disciplinary committee for discipline inspection. I'm going to make him pay, Sword Immortal Tian Hong said with a horrified expression. Let's go. On the other side, Guhan had also recovered. He grabbed Lu Shihua's hand and was about to leave the sword pavilion. Otherwise, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to control his impulse and use the immortal sword wielder grafting technique, or just kill Ku Rokin and take the Yu King Go Jian sword. On the way out of the sword pavilion, Guhan warned himself. Guhan, don't be rash. Things aren't over yet. There must be a way to stop this. That's right. You don't care about the Yu King Go Gen sword, you only care about the Yu King. The Yu King is not the Yu King Go Gen sword. The Yu King you care about is only a fragment of the game's consciousness. It's the memories and personality contained in this fragment of consciousness. You still have time. Log into the game immediately and think of a way to separate the Yu King's consciousness fragment from the game. Save her consciousness fragment and prevent it from being absorbed by the real Yu King Go Gen sword. This way, the Yu King still has a chance to live. Chapter 718. Unlike other people, if other people were to stand in Guhan's position and encounter the same situation as Guhan, they would be shocked. However, this was not the case for Guhan. One of his greatest strengths was that he could always maintain his rationality and use the calmest state to think of ways to change seemingly impossible things. Therefore, Guhan really came up with a solution. First of all, Ku Rokin couldn't be killed. Although Ku Rokin was a little Chunibya, it was undeniable that he was a good man. Moreover, at the critical moment, he had rushed out to stop Guhan for the benefit of Yuzhang City. Guhan believed that Sword Immortal Tianheng must have guessed that Sword Immortal Tianheng would use the Yu King Gojen sword to retaliate against him. However, Sword Immortal Tianheng still rushed out without hesitation. Not to mention that Ku Rokin had helped Guhan on the day of the trial. Guhan was able to retain his position as the Sword Firmament Pavilion's pavilion master because of his 1 million votes. If Guhan killed Ku Rokin, wouldn't he be biting the hand that fed him? In that case, what was the difference between Guhan and Yuan Ku? Since he couldn't kill Ku Rokin, could he use Sword Maiden grafting to steal King Yu from Ku Rokin? It was just like what Guhan had done to Kunzu in the game. The answer was also no. The reason was very simple. It was because the Sword Maiden grafting could only be used once in a sword wielder's life. It was absolutely impossible to use it a second time. Otherwise, the sword wielder would die because of the chaos in his Zifu. Guhan had already used Sword Maiden grafting on Jiyu Yun, so he couldn't use it again. Therefore, after much thought, Guhan only had one solution left. That was to extract King Yu's consciousness fragment from the game. The reason why Guhan had made up his mind to get King Yu's Go-Gen sword was because of his deep relationship with King Yu in-game. Therefore, what he really wanted was the King of Yu in the game and not the King of Yu in real life, Go-Gen-Gen. However, only after Guhan synchronized King Yu's Go-Gen sword would King Yu's consciousness fragment return to King Yu's main body in real life. The memories of the two would fuse together, allowing Guhan and King Yu to be together in real life. That was his main goal. Once upon a time, Guhan had neglected this goal. The moment he learned that King Yu's Go-Gen sword was synchronized by Ku Rokin, Guhan came to a realization and remembered his main goal. Although he understood his main goal, the current situation was still extremely dangerous for Guhan. When Ku Rokin and King Yu's Go-Gen sword successfully synchronized. Once Ku Rokin logged into the game with King Yu's main body, all of King Yu's consciousness fragments would return to his main body. The consciousness fragment in Guhan's hands was no exception. Although Guhan's King Yu would remain in Guhan's hands, at that time, King Yu would be no different from an artificial sword maiden without intelligence. The deep bond between Guhan and King Yu would also return to King Yu's main body with the return of the Jade Fragment. As for whether King Yu's main body would retain this memory or delete it, that wasn't something Guhan could decide. However, regardless of whether King Yu's main body would retain it or delete it, it would be an absolute torture for Guhan. Thus, the most urgent thing for Guhan was to think of a way to bring King Yu's consciousness fragment out of the game or isolate King Yu's consciousness fragment. He couldn't let King Yu's memory return to King Yu's main body. As for what happened after that, he didn't have a better idea. Perhaps he could create a virtual game space for King Yu and have his consciousness fragment live in this virtual space. He could enter this virtual space by entering the game and be with King Yu. Although this was a pain in the ass and he still wouldn't be able to meet King Yu in the real world, this was the best solution Guhan could think of. After leaving Yangjing Sword Tower, Guhan immediately rushed to Song Ifei's temporary residence under Lu Shihua's lead. He still had to log into the game at Songifei's house and find Tomono Kakaze to isolate King Yu's consciousness fragment. The silver lining in the misfortune was that Ju Elvren was sent to the Commission for Discipline Inspection by the Heaven Scar Sword. The Discipline Inspection Commission's cell didn't allow anyone to go online, and it was impossible for the Discipline Inspection Commission to try Wu Dao's case at night. Thus, before the next day, Ku Rokin definitely wouldn't be able to log into the game. This gave Guhan time to deal with the problem. Guhan had to use the fastest speed to isolate King Yu's consciousness fragment before Ku Rokin logged into the game. Even if he was a second late, it would be a huge difference. Guhan, you're back. Have you had dinner? I only made some food for lunch. Do you want me to heat it up for you? Song Ifei saw that Guhan had returned and was pleasantly surprised. He warmly greeted Guhan and prepared to heat up the food for him. Ifei, I'm very busy right now. I can't eat anything. Don't worry about me. Go do your own thing, Guhan said and left Song Ifei in a hurry. Seeing Guhan's reaction, Song Ifei felt wronged. 2 crystal-clear tears welled up in his eyes and were about to fall. However, before the tear could fall, Guhan returned to Song Ifei's side. Ifei, where's my room? Why don't I see it? Song Ifei's temporary home wasn't big. It only had 2 bedrooms. Guhan glanced at both bedrooms. They were filled with women's things. It was obvious that they were Song Ifei's and Liunian Ling's rooms. I thought you were going to stay at Ling's house today, so I didn't. Song Ifei panicked and said, Guhan, wait, I'll clean up Ling's room right now. No need. It's too late. Guhan shook his head immediately. He hesitated for a while and asked Song Ifei, which of these 2 rooms is yours? That. Song Ifei pointed at the door of his room. Ifei, I'm sorry. I'll use my room first. You can sleep in Ling's room first. I'll replace all the things that I've used with new ones, Guhan said in a hurry and rushed into Song Ifei's room. Qingpin, Jiyu Yun, Etienne, and you, Juzi, both of you should enter my purple mansion and enter the game with me. After hearing Guhan's words, Qingpin and Jiyu Yun, who were rushing into the kitchen, grimaced unwillingly and walked into Song Ifei's room painfully. They turned into swords and returned to Guhan's purple mansion. What's going on? Song Ifei then realized that something was wrong. Something serious happened to Guhan, forcing him to enter the game immediately. But what's the problem? Song Ifei touched his head but couldn't figure it out. Guhan, you're in Yangjing City. King Yu, who was sitting in the room in a daze, was pleasantly surprised to find that Guhan was online. When Guhan went offline last time, he clearly told King Yu that he wouldn't be able to log into the game for a long time because he had to take the armored levitating train to Yangjing City. This was the first time King Yu heard that Guhan was going offline for a long time. He was so happy that he was about to go crazy because this meant that Guhan was going to synchronize with her real body, King Yu Go Jian Jian Jian. She finally didn't have to spend the days that they could only meet in-game with Guhan. He could finally be with Guhan in real life. How could King Yu not be excited? However, King Yu was still a little disappointed when he saw Guhan come online. This was because she didn't feel like she was being summoned or attracted. This meant that Guhan didn't synchronize with her real body. Otherwise, the moment Guhan logged in, King Yu's consciousness would immediately be sucked back into her real body. Perhaps I arrived in Yangjing City too late. Guhan will only go to Sword Pavilion tomorrow to synchronize with his real body. King Yu thought of a reasonable explanation for himself and excitedly pounced into Guhan's arms. However, what happened next made King Yu feel a little embarrassed. Other than Guhan, Heaven Yi and Juzi, the sword lady whom King Yu had met in the past 2 months, also appeared in the game. When Guhan came online more than 10 times, Heaven Yi and Juzi's real bodies didn't follow and stayed in reality. This was because Guhan didn't need them to come online. He only needed their sword forms in-game. In addition, Heaven Yi and Juzi didn't seem to like the in-game environment and never took the initiative to ask Guhan to enter the game. Therefore, they were already online and Guhan came alone. King Yu was happy to enjoy the 2 of them alone and do some shameless things with Guhan. But now, Heaven Yi and Juzi entered the game. This wasn't a big deal. What King Yu didn't dare to imagine was that there was another Lolita Sword Lady who entered the game behind Heaven Yi and King Yu. This was the first time King Yu saw this Lolita Sword Lady. King Yu knew that in reality, Guhan had two other sword ladies. They were Qingpin Sword and Duyu Sword. However, these two sword ladies hated entering the game even more than Heaven Yi and Juzi Sword. From the moment King Yu heard their names, he hadn't seen them come online at all. In other words, this was the first time King Yu had seen Qingpin Sword or Duyu Sword. According to Heaven Yi, Guhan's favorite sword lady in reality was Qingpin Sword. However, he didn't know if this Lolita ship lady was Qingpin Sword or Duyu Sword. Chapter 719. The lowly sword lady that appeared in front of King Yu was naturally Duyu Zhen. In fact, Qingpin had also logged into the game. However, just like at the beginning, Qingpin was still chained up in the game. He could not transform into the sword lady form in the game, so he could not appear in front of King Yu. Therefore, Qingpin was constantly complaining in Guhan's head. He complained about why Guhan wanted him to log into the game, causing his hands and feet to be chained up. It was so uncomfortable. Alright, today's matter is a bit urgent. If it's not necessary in the future, I won't let you log into the game, Jiyu Hai said to Qingpin angrily. The reason why he wanted all the sword ladies to enter the game was because of Tomono Kakaze's orders. On the way back to Songifei's house, Guhan contacted Tomono Kakaze and told Tomono Kakaze about his situation. Originally, Tomono Kakaze did not want to care about this matter because it would not benefit him at all. Instead, it would expose him. However, Guhan threatened Tomono Kakaze that if he could not isolate King Yu's consciousness fragment, then Guhan would never log into the game again. He wanted to leave this sad place completely. This made Tomono Kakaze very helpless. She had her plan, and in order to realize it, Guhan had to enter the game. Therefore, Tomono Kakaze had no choice but to accompany Guhan and think for a long time before reminding Guhan of this matter. What happened to Guhan? Why do I feel like something is wrong? When King Yu saw that almost all of Guhan's sword ladies appeared in the game at the same time, he instinctively felt that something big was about to happen, and the source of this big thing might be him. King Yu, something unexpected has happened, but don't worry, I have a way to deal with it. You stay here and chat with Yi Tian and the others, I'll be back soon. After saying this, Ji Yu Han suddenly disappeared in front of King Yu. No one knew where he went. This was the second time Guhan came to Tomono Kakaze's residence. It was a Gothic castle and a huge room decorated with cute pink princesses. In this room, Guhan once again saw Tomono Kakaze with an unhappy expression. I'm so unlucky to be your friend. When she saw Guhan, Tomono Kakaze pouted and complained, What nonsense are you talking about? Why should I care about your nonsense? You're so annoying. It's useless to say anything else, Nina-chan. I owe you a huge favor this time. As long as you help me this time, I'll do my best to repay you, Guhan said to Tomono Kakaze very sincerely. Hearing Ji Yu Han's expression, the fragrant wind Tomono's grumbles were restrained by quite a bit, and a trace of unexpected caution appeared. This isn't going to be easy. Tomono Kakaze took the Angora rabbit off her head and slowly rubbed it in her hand. Those who were familiar with Tomono Kakaze would know that once Tomono Kakaze took the Angora rabbit off her head, it meant that Tomono Kakaze was in distress. There's no item in the game that can isolate the natural sword maiden's consciousness. Tomono Sasuke spread his hands. Although I was very sure of this, I still thoroughly searched through my database twice for you. Then, I can tell you again with great certainty that there is no such item in the game. Damn it. Guhan clenched his fists. According to Guhan's plan, the best way was to have an item in the game that could isolate the natural sword maiden's consciousness. Then, he would use this item to seal King Yu's memory fragments. First, he would prevent the risk of her merging with King Yu's Gojen sword. Then, he would think of a way to separate her consciousness fragments. Although Guhan was very familiar with the game, he couldn't remember the existence of such an item. Therefore, Guhan asked Tomono Kakaze to search his database to see if there was such an item. Now that the game's core artificial intelligence, Tomono Kakaze, said that there was no such item. It seemed that there was indeed no such item in the game. Hearing this, Guhan's heart fell into a dead silence. This eliminated half of Guhan's hope. Also, you want to directly separate a natural sword maiden's consciousness fragments from the game system. When I heard this request, I was almost scared to death. The ship girl's consciousness fragments are stored in the game system through a very complicated algorithm. Moreover, it's not that I don't control them, they're stored in a separate electronic container. That container is like a login terminal. All the sword maiden's consciousness fragments are stored in that container. It's just that they stay logged in all year round. If you want to illegally separate their consciousness fragments, you must first separate them from that container. Let alone the fact that I can't do this with my current ability. Even if I could, I wouldn't dare to do it. This container is in the hands of that pervert, Shen. If I do anything to that thing, he'll immediately teach me a lesson. He might even reformat my recent memories. I won't take this risk for you, Tomono Kakaze said honestly. Is that so? Then I'll have to trouble you. Guhan's tone was very calm, but the slight tremble at the end showed how excited his heart was. Just now, Tomono Kakaze's words were equivalent to a death sentence for betraying King Yu. Temporarily isolating King Yu's consciousness fragments was impossible. Completely separating King Yu's consciousness fragments was even more impossible. Wouldn't Guhan have no choice but to helplessly wait for Kurokin to log in? Then watch as King Yu's main body takes away his King Yu. What? Our famous military governor is also sad. He knows despair. Tomono Kakaze suddenly revealed a delighted smile. Seeing Tomono Kakaze's smile, Guhan's heart immediately calmed down. It seemed like Tomono Kakaze was purposely teasing him. Either what she said was a lie, or she had other ways to help him. Miss Tomono Kakaze, please don't tease me anymore. You know my time is very tight right now. Every second is very precious to me. If you have a way to help me, please tell me immediately. I'll be eternally grateful. Guhan's voice was a little hoarse and even choked. This made Tomono Kakaze, who was still snickering, unable to continue her performance. All right, I won't tease you anymore. Tomono Kakaze stuck out her tongue. I didn't have a way at first, but for some reason, a way suddenly popped up on its own 10 minutes ago. A way popped up on its own? What did that mean? Guhan was confused, but Tomono Kakaze quickly explained, just 10 minutes ago, when I was checking my database again, I suddenly discovered an abnormality in the system. You don't know, but ever since you logged into the game, I haven't found any abnormalities for more than 10 years. I don't even know how many abnormalities I've found in the past 4 months. Tomono Kakaze looked at Guhan with hatred, as if all these abnormalities were caused by Guhan. However, when she thought about it, it seemed that it was the truth. All the abnormalities were directly or indirectly related to Guhan. I carefully checked this abnormality and found that it came from a famed sword-level dungeon, but I don't know what this abnormality is exactly. Everything is shrouded in mystery. Even I, the game's core artificial intelligence, can't figure it out. But I've already encountered this situation 2 or 3 times. Every time, it was that big bastard Jetian who dug a hole for me, so I guess that Jetian left it here on purpose. When Tomono Kakaze mentioned the name yesterday, he angrily clenched his little fist, and then continuously knocked the head of the Angora rabbit in his hand. This bitter Angora rabbit was knocked to the point that tears were about to flow out. Then, I carefully checked it 5 times. Among all the codes that I could find, I found 2 very strange code. After saying that, Tomono Kakaze projected the 2 codes before Guhan. They were 2 strings of hundreds of digits. Unfortunately, Guhan was unable to understand the code. These 2 strings of codes actually represent 2 names. Tomono Kakaze's proud eyes revealed a look that said, "So, there are things that you don't know." The first code says military governor while the second one says king of Yu. You are so smart, you should be able to guess what this means. What you mean is that this is actually the instance dungeon that Yi Qing prepared for me. These 2 codes are a hint to me. She told me that as long as I enter this instance dungeon, I will be able to find a way to save King of Yu. Guhan's expression was very serious. However, there were many indescribable emotions within the seriousness. My guess is the same. Tomono Kakaze nodded her head. However, she immediately shook her head. However, this is only my guess. I do not know what the situation is. You can only rely on yourself. You must enter this instant's dungeon yourself to find the truth. I understand. Thank you. Guhan stood up and thanked Tomono Kakaze. It seemed that Guhan had to enter this instant's dungeon no matter what. This made Guhan even more curious about Yi Qing. This heaven-shrouding Gendi had actually predicted this moment 700 years ago. Then, he had planted the foreshadowing in Tomono Kakaze's body and waited for this day to erupt. After thinking about it carefully, he realized something even more terrifying. Tomono Kakaze had discovered the abnormality in the system 10 minutes ago. She believed that before that, there should not have been any abnormalities in this instant's dungeon. This was like a time bomb that was set to explode 10 minutes ago. If that was the case, then didn't this mean that the heaven-shrouding Gendi from 700 years ago had actually predicted this matter to the minute level? He knew 700 years ago that after 7:42 p.m. on the 21st of October, 3008 AD, he would come for a date with Tomono Kakaze. Thinking about it, it was simply hair-raising. Chapter 720. You're back. Eat something. Seeing that Guhan had returned home, Yu Wang happily brought out a plate of pastries for Guhan. Guhan picked up a piece of pastry and put it in her mouth. Then, she waved her hand, indicating for Yu Wang to take away the rest of the pastries and let her sit beside him. Yu Wang, sit here properly. I have something very important to tell you. What is it? Is it? Seeing Guhan's cautious expression, Yu Wang vaguely guessed that something terrible was about to happen to her. Next, Guhan told Yu Wang everything, including how she tried her best to stop Ku Rokin, but in the end, she failed because of the mysterious Yuan Ku. While listening to Guhan's narration, Yu Wang, who was sitting upright, gradually curled up into a ball. She was like a hedgehog that was extremely afraid. Yu Wang's entire body was trembling. She clearly knew what it meant for her main body to be synchronized by other sword-bearers. It's all your fault. It's all your fault, you bastard. Why did you have to stab him with such a heartless sword? Yu Wang lay in Guhan's arms and hit Guhan's chest. Otherwise, she didn't know how to release the fear in her heart. You bastard, you beast, what should I do? Am I going to leave you soon? I really don't want to leave you. Can you think of a way to let me die? Yu Wang's words were like sharp knives stabbing into Guhan's heart, making Guhan speechless. Yu Wang, listen to me. Things aren't that bad yet. We can still fight one last time. Guhan hugged Yu Wang tightly in his arms and looked at her panicked and lifeless eyes. He said calmly and with a sense of security. Thus, Guhan told her about his plan to separate Yu Wang's consciousness fragment and let her temporarily live in an independent virtual space, as well as the conversation with Tomono Kakaze. Then I won't be locked up in jail. Hearing Guhan's plan, King Yu's expression was a bit gloomy, and I'm going to be locked up in prison for the rest of my life, never to come out. Wouldn't I be even more miserable? Guhan was silent for a while because he understood that things were just as King Yu said. Even if his plan succeeded, King Yu would live in a small virtual space and no longer merge with his main body. That was no different from a prison. King Yu definitely could not leave that virtual space for even a second, or else what awaited King Yu was the shattering of his consciousness. I promise. I'll spend at least 8 hours every day. No, 4 hours. No, 5 hours in the virtual space with you. Guhan squeezed King Yu's hand. From the constant changes in time, it could be seen how extravagant it was for Guhan to spend 5 hours with King Yu every day. That virtual space was not a game world, it could allow Guhan to improve his sword essence in the game. In that world, other than accompanying King Yu, Guhan could not do anything else. To put it bluntly, these 5 hours were completely wasted. 24 hours a day was equivalent to wasting 1/5 of Guhan's life. What's the difference? A cage is a cage after all. Whether you're here or not, it's still a cage. King Yu smiled miserably. You should let me die. Let me end myself right now. Otherwise, once I return to my main body, my current memories and feelings will become an even more laughable joke. Pa. Before King Yu could finish, he was slapped in the face. However, the one who was slapped was not Guhan, but Juzi, who had been silent all this time. You. King Yu touched his face, not knowing what kind of expression he should show. If I have to die, I'll die first. Juzi, who had been as obedient as an artificial sword lady, looked at the King of Yu with an empty gaze. After that, she turned around and walked away. The entire process was a little strange. Juzi's slap was also a little strange. What the hell is this? King Yu could not understand the current situation. He could not understand why Juzi slapped him. I let her down. Looking at Juzi's back, Guhan's face was filled with shame. She's also my famous sword maiden in the real world. What? King Yu raised his head in shock and looked at Guhan in disbelief. You already have a famous sword maiden in the real world. I had no choice. It was all for Yuzhong City. Guhan sighed, then told him everything about Juzi's sword. Yuzhong City was facing a life and death crisis. If I didn't coordinate with Juzi, then there would have been no Yuzhong City in this world 20 days ago. My 40 million people would have turned into a pile of bones. I had no other choice. At that time, I thought I could find green hair sever and sever my and Juzi's sword marks, then coordinate with you, so I didn't tell you about this. I didn't expect things to turn out like this. Things in this world really shouldn't be calculated. Guhan shook his head helplessly. Pa. As if returning the favor, another slap landed on Guhan's face. Guhan did not dodge because it was King Yu who slapped him. You idiot, big pervert. King Yu's eyes were filled with tears. You actually wanted to use green hair sever to sever Juzi's sword marks. Do you know how cruel this is to Juzi? You might even destroy Juzi's life. You're worse than a pig or a dog. Someone like you wants to sweep away Yuan Ku and become a hero that saves humanity. Are you worthy? King Yu's words made Guhan even more speechless. Besides remaining silent, Guhan couldn't say anything. Are the three of you acting in a primetime love triangle family drama? Yi Tian and Ji Yun each held a dozen pastries in their hands as they sat shoulder to shoulder in front of Guhan's group. They nibbled on the pastries while watching Guhan's group perform. In the end, it was Ji Yun who couldn't help but interrupt. Her interruption made King Yu feel awkward. However, it helped King Yu get rid of his painful emotions. Continue. I'm having fun watching this. Hurry up and continue. Yi Tian poured a mouthful of wine into her mouth and swallowed it along with the pastries stuck in her mouth. With Yi Tian's words, King Yu definitely wouldn't continue. Guhan secretly gave Yi Tian a thumbs up. Then, he grabbed King Yu's hand and walked to Juzi's side. Then, he grabbed Juzi's hand and took a deep breath. His expression instantly became serious and domineering. Let the past be the past. From now on, I won't give up on any of you. It doesn't matter if you're willing or not. King Yu. I will keep you by my side forever, until the day I die. As you wish. King Yu's voice was as soft as a mosquito. Rise from the Ground Instance Dungeon was a relatively unpopular instance dungeon among the famed sword instance dungeons. Due to the dungeon's boring content and long duration, the dungeon did not drop many rewards. Hence, this dungeon was not very popular. Aside from a few players determined to clear every dungeon, very few players attempted this dungeon. The story of Rise from the Ground took place 54 years after the hero's Rise from the Ground dungeon. In history, it was also in this year that Shrouding the Heavens, who had been Gendi for 10 years, officially announced to all humans that he would build a brand new human base city on the ruins of NC City. He gave this base a resounding name, Yuzhong City. The phrase Rise from the Ground was used to describe the story of a huge base city that could accommodate 20 million people rising from the ruins in a short period of 10 years. When Guhan's vision was restored, he saw a bustling scene. Countless humans were working hard on the ruins. Most of them were only using simple tools in their hands to work. Other than that, Guhan could vaguely see a few excavators waving their giant arms in the distance. Other than that, there were no other heavy construction machines. Is this how Yuzhong City looked like when it was built? If it was not for the fact that the history books had repeated it over and over again, even Guhan would not believe that Yuzhong City was built with such simple tools. According to the statistics in the history books, it was said that in the early stages of Yuzhong City's construction, humans' industrial capabilities had yet to fully recover. They were unable to mass-produce large-scale construction machines. Thus, at that time, Zhetian Zhendi only managed to gather less than 100 construction machines. After 5 years, Zhetian Zhendi increased the number of construction machines to 1,000. According to historical records, in the 4th year of the construction of Yuzhong City, the foundation of this huge base city, which could accommodate 20 million people, was completely built. This was completely relying on the strength of human hands. It could be said to be a miracle in human history. The beginning of the rise from the ground instance dungeon was the initial stage of this miracle. The scene that Guhan saw was the scene of the first residents of Yuzhong City working hard for their future home. System notification. Player military governor, welcome to the rise from the ground instance dungeon. Quest objective. Help Zhetian Zhendi build Yuzhong City until Zhetian Zhendi is satisfied. Please note, you have a total of 40 hours. Within these 40 hours, once Zhetian Zhendi's touched by the sky reaches a basic level of approval, you may exit the instance dungeon. At the same time, you may challenge for a higher level of approval. Your evaluation for the instance dungeon will be based on Zhetian Zhendi's touched by the sky. System notification. Quest 1 has been updated. First time here, find the person in charge of this construction site and accept the quest from the person in charge. Gain their approval and have the person in charge introduce you to Zhetian Zhendi. Chapter 721. According to the quest's requirements, Guhan needed to find the person in charge of the construction site. In fact, the person in charge was not difficult to find because he was standing in the most conspicuous position. There was a high platform in the middle of the construction site, and there seemed to be something lying on the platform. Guhan walked to the side of the platform expressionlessly. Only then did we realize that it was not something lying on the platform, but a person. But the person's posture was very strange. He was kneeling in a very strange position. His hands were crossed and placed on top of his head like a pillow. His tongue was sticking out and he looked like a dog. Yes, that's right. He looked like a dog because he was originally a dog. Our Guhan's good friend and subordinate, the great U-level Yuan Ku, the Egyptian god of death, the ruler of hell, His Majesty Anubis, was lying on the ground like a dog. Who asked him to be a dog? It was not strange for Anubis to appear here. He was originally Yuan Ku, who was controlled by Zhetian. Guhan remembered that Isis had looked at the entrance of the emergency response center with nostalgia and said that she was the one who built it. So, when Yuzhong City was built, the 3 Egyptian gods had also contributed a lot. Woof. Perhaps sensing that a stranger had appeared beside it, Anubis retracted its tongue and straightened its body. It opened its hazy eyes and slowly looked at Ji Han. Human. Has Lord Anubis seen you somewhere before? That was the first thing Anubis said. He felt that he had seen Guhan somewhere before, but his memory was a little vague, so he could not be sure. These words shocked Ji Han. Anubis had indeed seen him before. Back then, he was the one who had found Anubis in the first temple. But that was something that had happened in the instance dungeon and had not happened in the real world. Anubis should have never seen him before, but he felt that he was familiar. Didn't that mean that he still remembered what had happened in the temple? But where did his memory come from? Was it from the hero's rise from insignificance instance dungeon? Or did it come from the mysterious reality? Or was this just a trap that Yi Qing had dug? It seems that the truth can only be revealed when I see Yi Qing. Guhan glanced at Anubis. He did not expect to get any useful information from the husky. If he could see Yi Qing in this instance dungeon, he might be able to find out more. If Guhan wanted to see Yi Qing, he would have to follow the system's procedures and complete the quest that the husky had given him. So, Guhan touched the husky's head. Lord Anubis, I'm a sword-bearer from Yangjing City. The Yangjing City Sword Committee has ordered me to help Lord Heaven-Shrouding Sword Emperor build this great city. If there's anything you need me to do, just tell me. I promise to complete the task. Nice. Your touch is so nice. Awoo. Unexpectedly, Ji Yuhan's action of patting the husky's head made the husky feel very comfortable. Its whole body softly lay back on the ground and whimpered in enjoyment. After all, the husky had the bloodline of a wolf, so it was not strange for it to howl. Lord Anubis, stop joking around. Hurry up and give me the quest. Guhan secretly gathered a small amount of sword energy on his fingertip and stabbed the husky's butt. The husky immediately jumped up as if it had taken a stimulant and looked around vigilantly. Who is it? Who is plotting against the Great Grim Reaper? Ahem. Great Grim Reaper, hurry up and give me the quest. Guhan coughed hard, indicating that he was waiting for the husky to give him the quest. Quest. Let me see what quest I can give you. The husky was very distressed. How would it know what quest to give to Guhan? The quest that he was doing now was given to him by Isis. That's right. The Great Grim Reaper's workers have not eaten bones, no, meat with bones for more than 30 days. The Grim Reaper has heard that there is a herd of bison nearby. There are a lot of bison with thick bones. Go and catch 10 for the Grim Reaper. System prompt. Quest 1 has been completed. You have accepted the quest. System prompt. Quest 2 has been updated. Replenish food. The workers have not eaten meat for a long time and their bodies have become weak. Please capture 10 bison and bring them to the person in charge to replenish their strength. Anyone who had played online games would know that this was a very normal quest. Almost all online games would have such a quest. It was a simple quest to kill monsters. Although the Rise from the Ground dungeon was not very popular, there had been tens of thousands of strategy guides posted on the forum over the past 200 years. Before entering the dungeon, Guhan had carefully read through a few of the strategy guides with the highest number of likes. He was very familiar with the general process of the Rise from the Ground dungeon. According to the strategy guides, the husky would randomly give the player 3 different quests. The player would have to kill 10 bison, 10 boars, or 10 antelopes. In short, they were all related to food, which was very much in line with the husky's character. From this, it could be seen that although the husky found Guhan familiar, it did not change the normal process of the dungeon. The quests given to Guhan were exactly the same as the others. From this point, it could be seen that the dungeon had not changed. Yuan Ku's hatred seemed to be relative to humans. For animals other than humans, Yuan Ku did not kill them. Of course, there were some Yuan Ku who would kill other animals because they were hungry, but most of the time, they lived in harmony with the animals. Therefore, after the apocalypse, the wildlife resources in some areas were restored to a considerable extent. After some domestic cattle were freed from human control, they returned to the bison of their ancestors and formed herds of bison that were scattered in various areas around Yuzhang City. However, what was ironic was that after Yuzhang City was established, and the area within 200 kilometers of Yuzhang City was once again under control, these bison herds once again disappeared. They either became food for humans, or became domestic cattle in the hands of humans, waiting to be slaughtered. From this point of view, the invasion of Yuan Hen was probably a good thing for animals. Dealing with bison was not difficult for a famed sword-level swordswoman. Any famed sword-level sword mistress could slaughter the entire herd with a few slashes. However, this quest was still difficult, because there was a 5-colored divine cow in this herd of bison. Just from the name, it was obvious that this 5-colored sacred bull was not a simple bull. It was a Yuan Ku, a powerful flood dragon Yuan Ku. Yuan Ku name, 5-colored sacred bull. Level, flood dragon. World of 2-dimensional, Eastern Demon Realm. Instance Dungeon, China Instance Dungeon. HP, 4, 5 stars. Attack, 3 stars. Agility, 2 stars. Demonic power, 3 stars. Ability, bull's horns can launch attacks of the 5 elements. Running speed is very fast. When running at full speed, it can reach a speed of 400 km per hour. Ultimate skill, 5-colored sacred light, giant horn charge, cloud riding mist. Description: the 5-colored sacred bull is the mount of the dragon Yuan Ku Huang Feihu. It is inseparable from Huang Feihu. The appearance of the five-colored sacred bull here means that Huang Feihu may also be nearby. Please be careful. No one knew why the five-colored sacred bull would appear in a herd of ordinary bison, but Guhan was not interested in finding out. This was just a quest obstacle designed by the system. Otherwise, it would be too easy to complete the quest after killing 10 bison. Because the opponent was just a simple flood dragon Yuan Ku, Guhan did not take the five-colored sacred bull seriously. If time allowed, Guhan wanted to release King Yu and use the five-colored sacred bull to train his sword skills. Unfortunately, Guhan did not have the time. He had to speed up the process of the instance dungeon and find Yi Qing as soon as possible. He had to find out the secret Yi Qing left in this instance dungeon and figure out what he should do to keep King Yu by his side. No one knew when Ku Rock-in would bring King Yu's Go Gen's main body into the game. Guhan had to seize every second. Go die. The five-colored divine ox, who was leisurely eating grass, suddenly had its horns flash with five-colored light. The five-colored divine ox raised its head in fear and found that there were 5 streams of sword chi flying towards its head. Five-colored sacred light. Of course, the five-colored sacred bull could not speak, and naturally could not say the name of the skill. It could only let out 2 fearful cries. Just treat it as saying the name of the skill. A five-colored light shot out from the five-colored divine bull's horns. If the sword wielder was hit by this light, not only would they suffer a lot of damage, their bodies would also be affected by any of the 5 statuses, which represented wood, fire, metal, earth, and water. A normal sword wielder at the famed sword level would be at a great disadvantage when facing the five-colored divine light. Unfortunately, the five-colored divine light had no meaning against Ji Yu Han. Ji Yu Han's 5-sword chi instantly pierced through the five-colored divine light. Then, it looked at the five-colored divine ox's body and instantly killed the flood dragon Yuan Shen. Seeing that its leader, the five-colored sacred bull, had been reduced to pieces, the herd began to flee in panic. Guhan quickly shot out 10 more sword energies, accurately cutting the throats of the 10 strongest wild bulls. The frantic escape caused the blood of the 10 wild bulls to quickly flow out, and the blood that spurted out from the wounds on their necks became faster. In a short while, the 10 wild bulls fell to the ground because of the blood loss. They became Guhan's spoils of war and were put into Guhan's dimensional pocket. When he collected the bodies of the wild bulls, Guhan was somewhat surprised to find that the 10 wild bulls were all cows. There was not even a single bull. Seeing this, Guhan roughly knew why the five-colored sacred bull had appeared in the herd of ordinary wild bulls. Lust is like a knife above your head. The ancients did not deceive me. Chapter 722. Completing this quest was not as simple as killing 10 cows and bringing them back. The strategy guide on the forum was very clear. Players had to choose healthy cows to bring back. This way, they would be able to gain Anubis's favor and receive a higher evaluation from him. It was said that this evaluation would also be extended to Zhetian Zhendi, which would allow Zhetian Zhendi's initial evaluation of the players to be higher. As expected, when Anubis saw Guhan take out 10 healthy cows from his dimensional pocket, a smile immediately appeared on his face. He touched the cow's bones and felt the thickness of the bones. He could not help but drool from the corner of his mouth. Very good, very good, very good. Although Anubis's words were directed at Guhan, his eyes were fixed on the cow. Everyone, stop for a moment. Come to my side. Anubis called all the surrounding workers to his side. He pointed at the 10 cows on the ground and said to the workers, "These will be your dinner tonight. You guys eat the meat, and I'll eat the bones." Anubis's words immediately moved the workers. What a great leader, although he did not do much and only slept on the rocks. Perhaps it was because he was a leader, and a leader had to be a mental worker, not a physical one. Moreover, this leader knew how to share weal and woe with the workers. He gave the tastiest beef to the workers while he gnawed on the bones. What a great sentiment. Suddenly, the majority of the workers had a good impression of Anubis. This was something that Anubis did not expect. Do any of you know how to cook beef? Prepare the 10 cows for me. Remember to separate the meat from the bones. Do you understand? Anubis could not wait to eat the bone soup. Leader. Cooking beef is very simple. We can do it. My family makes Lanju beef ramen. A worker who looked like he was from Xinjiang raised his hand and said, "But leader, if you give us a piece of beef, we can cook it. If you give us an entire cow, we will be at a loss. We will not be able to skin and remove the bones. We will need to find a professional butcher." Butcher. Anubis frowned and looked at the workers who had gathered around. There were quite a few of them. "Let me ask you, are any of you butchers?" The crowd was dead silent. It seemed that there was no butcher among the workers. This put Lalabis in a difficult position. Using his strength, it was not difficult to cut off these pieces of flesh. The difficult part was to completely separate the flesh and bones. Woof. Anubis barked in exasperation, then said to Guhan, "Forget it. You guys can do whatever you want. I'll take you to Zhetian Jendi first." According to the guide, Guhan should follow Anubis' wishes and go to Zhetian Jendi with him. This was Guhan's original mission. However, Anubis had lived in Guhan's house for more than 20 days. During these 20 days, Guhan and Anubis ate at the same table. Guhan more or less understood the husky's taste. Guhan knew that Anubis' taste was very unique. He liked to eat pure bones. If there was even a little bit of meat on the bones, he would not be happy. In the beginning, when Mayun deliberately did not clean the bones, she left a lot of meat on the bones. This was not because when Mayun was lazy. Just look at the menu and you will know that there are no bones in the world. In the end, everyone else ate happily, except for Anubis, who was crestfallen when he saw the bone, his expression unfriendly. Only then did Jiyu Han and the rest understand Anubis' preferences. From then on, when Mayun made bones for Anubis, she would always shave them cleanly, without leaving any meat on them. "Let me try." Guhan suddenly walked out of the crowd and picked up the heaven-reliant sword. Immediately, a wave of sword light enveloped all 40 oxen. The onlookers felt as if there were thousands of butterflies fluttering in front of them. In less than 5 seconds, all the butterflies had disappeared, and Jiyu Han sheathed the heavenly sword back into its scabbard. What just happened? The onlookers looked at each other. They had roughly guessed that Guhan was performing a sword dance earlier. However, they did not know why Guhan had performed a sword dance. Could it be that he wanted to see them working hard? Could it be that he wanted to put on a show for them? Good sword technique. Anubis was the only one who had clearly seen Guhan's sword technique. He knew what Guhan had done. "Take all the meat away. Then, stew the bones for me," Anubis instructed excitedly. The onlookers responded. They picked up their kitchen knives and prepared to cut the meat. However, they were stopped by Anubis. "Why are you still using knives? Just take the meat away, woof." In desperation, Anubis barked again. Did the leader mean that the meat had already been cut? The onlookers were skeptical. However, since the leader had said so, they would do as the leader said. In any case, the leader would be the one to lose face, not them. Thus, the onlookers stepped forward and attempted to use their hands to pick up the meat from the cows. In an instant, all the meat on the 10 cows disappeared, leaving only their skeletons. After carefully inspecting the skeletons, the onlookers found that not a single piece of meat was left on the skeletons. Is this the legendary sword wielder? To think that a sword wielder could be this powerful. The way the onlookers looked at Guhan instantly changed. There was a look of worship in their eyes. In their eyes, Guhan was no longer an ordinary human. Rather, he was like a sword immortal. "Good brother, I will bring you to meet Zhetian Jendi." As Guhan had helped Anubis keep his skeletons intact, Anubis had quietly changed the way he addressed Guhan. That surprised Guhan. Why did he get the feeling that the Anubis in the Instance dungeon was much smarter than the Anubis in the real world? In the real world, no matter how well you treat the husky, it would not give you a grateful look. At most, it would look at you as if you were an idiot. This was the second time Guhan had met Zhetian Jendi in the Instance dungeon. Guhan had thought that he would be able to see the gentle Yiqing again. Unexpectedly, when he saw Zhetian Jendi, he was no longer Zhetian. Instead, He was an old man with a stern face and a beard that fluttered in the wind. However, he could faintly make out Yi Qing's face. This is how Je Tian Jendi looks like in the history book. Guhan's heart skipped a beat. In fact, Guhan had already expected that the Yi Qing before him would look like a man. Because that was how she looked in the history books. In the Heroes Begin with Insignificance Instance dungeon, Yi Qing looked like a teenager. At that time, Yi Qing was thin and weak. It was not easy to determine her gender. Although it was not worth it, why did Yi Qing disguise herself as a man? But she must have her own reasons, so in front of outsiders, she would definitely dress up as a man. Perhaps after Anubis left, Yi Qing would reveal her true appearance. Yi Qing sat quietly on a rock, seemingly meditating. She did not even bat an eyelid when she saw Guhan enter, as if no one had entered at all. "Boss, a swordsman from Yangjing City is looking for you. He said that he is here to support us. Tell him what you need to do," Anubis said to Yi Qing. "Yangjing City is willing to send someone to me." Je Tian Jendi finally opened his eyes and looked Guhan up and down, but there was no change in his eyes. It was as if he had never seen Guhan before. "All right. Since Yangjing City sent someone to give it to me, if I don't use it, it would be disrespecting the Yangjing City Sword Committee." Je Tian Jendi raised his eyelids. "I don't know when this list appeared in my hands. Take a look." The list in Je Tian Jendi's hands began to move, even though there was no wind. Suddenly, it floated up and landed firmly in Guhan's hands. Guhan knew about this list. Every player who attempted this dungeon would receive this list. The list listed the tasks that Je Tian Jendi needed players to do for him. As long as a player completed one of the tasks on the list, they would receive a certain amount of favorability from Je Tian Jendi. "You can complete the tasks from 1 to 10 on this list," Je Tian Jendi said. The list was simply numbered, and there was a long list of tasks. There was a total of 60 tasks. However, the rewards of the tasks were not written on the list. Later, the players who studied the instance dungeon discovered that the quests numbered 1 to 10 on the list rewarded the least favorability points. Each quest only rewarded 0.2% favorability points. Tasks numbered 10 to 20 gave 0.5% favorability. Tasks numbered 20 to 30 gave 1% favorability, and tasks numbered 30 to 40 gave 2% favorability. The reward for missions 40 to 50 was 3% favorability. The favorability reward for missions 50 to 60 was unknown because from the beginning to the end, no player had been able to unlock missions 50 to 60. That's right. Aside from tasks numbered 1 to 10, the rest of the tasks on the list were locked. Only when a player's favorability with Je Tian Jendi reached a certain value could they unlock the rest of the tasks. This was also the reason why mission 50 to 60 could not be unlocked. No matter how the previous players experimented, they could not reach the point where they could unlock mission 50 to 60. Even if there was an extremely overpowered player who used 39 hours to complete all of mission 50 to 50, he still could not unlock mission 50 to 60. The heaven-shrouding sword emperor's favorability towards him remained at the level of treating him like an arm. After handing the list to Guhan, Je Tian Jendi chased him away coldly. "Get out now. Hurry up and complete the task. Don't waste time here." According to Ji Yuhan's original guess, since there was an anomaly in this instance dungeon, it was very likely that this instance dungeon was a backup plan that Yi Qing had left for him. When he met the heaven-shrouding sword emperor in the instance dungeon, it was possible that it would be similar to the instance dungeon heroes rise from humble beginnings. Yi Qing's consciousness in the game would automatically jump out to help him. At the very least, it would show him something special. To Guhan's disappointment, the process of the dungeon was exactly the same as in the guide. Je Tian Jendi hadn't changed anything. Chapter 723. As Guhan was about to proceed with the quest list, Anubis suddenly spoke up. "Boss, this swordsman's swordsmanship is quite good. He was able to separate the flesh and bones of 10 bison in 5 seconds. I think you should give him a more difficult quest." "Is that so?" Je Tian Jendi looked at Guhan in surprise. Then, he nodded. "Very well. You can complete the quests from 1 to 20 on this list. As a result, the quests from 10 to 20, which required the completion of the 5 quests from 1 to 10, were instantly unlocked. According to the guide, if the bison was strong enough, Anubis would say to Jetian Jendi, "This fellow has good eyesight." Although the heaven-shrouding Sword Emperor's feelings would not change after Anubis finished speaking, the 5 quests that had to be completed would be reduced to 4. This was equivalent to increasing the heaven-shrouding Sword Emperor's favorability. Now, however, Guhan had unlocked quests from 10 to 20. This was something that had never happened in the guide. This meant that Guhan's initial favorability was higher than that of the other players. After that, Jetian Jendi lost interest in Guhan. Guhan tactfully took the quest list and left Jetian Jendi's room. Guhan looked at the unlocked quests on the list. These quests were no different from the quests from 1 to 20 published in the guide. In fact, these 50 quests were fixed. Regardless of who it was, or how many times they had entered this instance dungeon, the quests on the list would remain the same. There would be no changes. According to his previous experience in the dungeon, if Guhan wanted to find the item left behind by Yi Qing, he would need to trigger the abnormal node of this dungeon. Before entering this dungeon, Guhan had speculated where the abnormal node of this dungeon would be. The abnormal node of the Wudang Peak instance dungeon was after Guhan kicked the old man off the cliff. The abnormal node of the heroes begin at the end instance dungeon was after he met Black Artoria. So, Guhan speculated that the rise from the ground instance dungeon should also have such an abnormal node. Among them, the one in Guhan's hand was the one in his hand. He felt that the quests he received would be different from the quests completed by other players. Now, it would appear that Guhan's guess was wrong. Up until now, Guhan had not received any special treatment in the dungeon, except for the quests from 10 to 20. However, that should be a hidden quest of the dungeon. This was a change brought about by Guhan's help in separating Anubis' flesh and blood. It was not an abnormality that existed in the first place. Quests from 1 to 10 on the list were very simple quests. According to the guide in the forum, quests from 1 to 10 would require him to face Yuan Ku, who was no higher than a ghost-class Yuan Ku. Even a sword-class swordsman could easily complete these quests. That did not mean that quests from 1 to 10 were easy. Some of these quests required a lot of time. For example, Quest 6. This quest required Guhan to help 4 workers dig out a foundation that was 100 meters long, 10 meters wide and 3 meters deep. This was a very safe quest. He would not even be able to meet Yuan Ku. However, this quest required a lot of time. According to the forum, the fastest time to complete this quest was 1.5 hours. That was because the best tool to complete this quest was a sharp shovel. Players could bring other in-game items into the dungeon. For example, a player had brought an excavator into the dungeon in an attempt to drive the excavator to complete this quest. However, when the excavator appeared in the dungeon, Anubis appeared as well. Anubis then drove the excavator away, saying that the excavator was going to be used in a more important place. Even after the player left the dungeon, the excavator was not returned to the player. It was forcefully used up in the dungeon. After some experimentation, the player discovered that the best tool to use in this dungeon was a shovel. Any tool that was larger than a shovel would be forcefully taken away by Anubis. Therefore, players generally ignored this quest. After all, they only needed to complete 6 quests from the 1st to the 10th. This 6th quest, which was a waste of time, energy, and passion, was directly passed by most players. Only those with obsessive-compulsive disorder, the pursuit of perfection, or those who entered the dungeon with the goal of completing all the quests in the first place. Right now, time was the most precious thing for Guhan. The sooner he discovered the abnormality in the dungeon and found the method that Yi Qing left for him, the sooner he could extract the fragment of King Yu's will. Logically speaking, Guhan should not waste time on this quest 6. However, according to Guhan's analysis, the key to finding the abnormality in this dungeon was on the list. It was very likely that after he completed one of the quests on the list, the abnormality would appear on its own. Therefore, Guhan felt that it was necessary for him to complete all the quests on the list. First of all, Ji Han chose to complete the digging mission on the 6th. For other players, this was a painful quest that required more than an hour and a half to complete. However, for Gu Han, this was actually the easiest quest to complete. According to the hints on the quest list, Gu Han found 4 workers who were silently digging. They were waving shovels and silently plowing the ground. However, their efficiency was very impressive. One shovel after another, they dug out a foundation that was 100 meters long, 10 meters wide, and 3 meters deep. By the time they dug out a foundation, it would probably be the next day. Move aside, leave this to me. Gu Han, who did not want to waste time, quickly walked in between the 4 workers and interrupted their work. Who are you? Let you do it. Can you dig the entire foundation alone? The 4 workers who were interrupted by Gu Han were very unhappy. One of the sturdiest workers scolded Gu Han with a northeast accent. Another worker quickly pulled him back and whispered, "Don't be stubborn with him. I've seen this person before. He is the sword-bearer from Yangjing City. The sword-bearer who split the flesh of 10 wild oxen with just a few swings of his sword." The burly man was shocked. His neck shrank back, and his aura instantly weakened. "Sir, how can we trouble you with such a difficult task? Just leave it to us. After all, our lives depend on the protection of an important person like you." One of the workers came up to him in a fawning manner. How could they dare to let a sword-bearer help them dig a hole? "Say no more. This is a quest that I personally requested from His Majesty Zhejendi. Leave the foundation to me." Gu Han glanced at the 4 workers from the corner of his eye. The 4 workers looked as if they had seen hell. They trembled in fear and stood there, not daring to say a word. 9 swords of mysterious heaven, sword in the field. Gu Han stabbed the heavenly sword in his hand into the ground, and the only move in the 9 swords of mysterious heaven that could destroy the ground burst out instantly. The workers around Gu Han suddenly felt the ground shake, as if an earthquake was coming. Just as they threw away the tools in their hands and were about to run away, the earthquake instantly stopped. What just happened? The workers asked each other in confusion. Then, someone with sharp eyes discovered that a large, deep pit had appeared at the center of the earthquake. The pit was filled with sharp stones. The workers gathered around, and one of them slapped his head and shouted, "I remember now. Isn't this place supposed to be digging a foundation? Is this the foundation that has already been dug? Did you deliberately dig out a pile of sharp stones when you were digging the foundation? This is obviously caused by the earthquake," another worker said, unconvinced. All right, all of you, disperse and do your own things." At this time, Bastet, who was pretending to be a cat, appeared out of nowhere and shouted at the onlookers. It was obvious that the workers were very afraid of Bastet. As soon as Bastet spoke, the workers did not dare to breathe and quickly returned to their posts. Only the 4 workers who were responsible for digging the pit were still standing there. "Did you guys dig this out?" Bastet took a deep look at the stone forest and then asked the 4 workers. No. The 4 workers hurriedly waved their hands and pointed at Gu Han, who was standing at the side, and said in unison, "It was dug out by the sword-bearer." In the end, the worker from the northeast thought for a moment and added, "It was dug out in an instant." "You are the sword-bearer that Anubis praised so much?" Bast took a deep look at Ji Han. His eyes were a little playful, but he didn't say anything to Ji Han. Instead, he ordered the 4 workers, "Why don't you go and measure the length, width, and depth of this pit? See if it meets the requirements of the foundation." Hearing Bastet's words, the 4 workers immediately ran at full speed. They picked up the measuring tools and began to measure the length, width, and depth of the pit. After a while, one of the workers ran over excitedly. "This sword-bearer is really amazing. It's just right. It's 100 meters long, 10 meters wide, and 3 meters deep. There's not even a meter of error. That's interesting." Bastet walked to Gu Han's side and gently patted Gu Han's shoulder. His mouth moved closer to Gu Han's ear and whispered to Gu Han, "Did your father tell you? You look exactly like him when he was young." "My father?" Gu Han was silent. He did not know how to ridicule Bastet. "Go tell your father not to get involved in this matter anymore. Since he has already left, he should not come back." His Majesty is no longer the majesty of the past. After saying this somewhat inexplicable sentence, Bastet lazily left Guhan's side. Is this the anomaly node? Guhan's mouth showed a trace of doubt. What do you mean by His Majesty is no longer the majesty of the past? Chapter 724. Although the standard length, width, and depth of the pit had been dug out, the task was not over. There were clusters of sharp stone awls in the deep pit formed by the sword. The task would only be completed after the entire stone forest was smashed and moved out of the deep pit. Erasing the stone forest was just a matter of a few sword energies. Guhan quickly used his own sword energy to cut off all the stone awls. Then, he instructed the 4 workers to move the broken stone awls out. The northeastern worker was the first to jump into the pit and prepare to move the stone awl away. This northeastern man, who usually boasted of his strength as a Hercules, instantly turned red when he picked up the stone awl and began to exert his strength. These stone awls weighed at least 100 kilograms. The northeastern man could only lift the stone awls slightly before he could no longer support them and dropped the stone awls back to their original positions. What are you guys looking at here for? Let's help together, the northeastern man said very unhappily. The remaining 3 workers laughed and worked together. With the combined strength of 4 people, they finally lifted the entire stone awl. How long do you guys think it will take to move all these stone awls out? A worker looked at the hundreds of stone awls in the big pit and asked with a headache. Thinking about moving all these stone awls away, the worker felt his legs go soft. Why do you care so much? Anyway, it will definitely take much longer than us digging the pit. The northeastern man retorted. No. I was thinking that since the sword energy of the sword bearer is so powerful, why not just cut all these stone awls into pieces? We can put them in a basket and carry them out. It will be easier, the worker explained with a smile. You coward. We have already gotten the advantage, why are you still selling your D***CK? The northeastern man retorted again. He was about to say something, but suddenly, his mouth opened wide and he could not say a word. It turned out that the northeastern man suddenly realized that a huge stone awl had suddenly floated in front of him. This northeastern man thought he had seen a ghost. Only when he lowered his head did he realize that there was actually a little girl under the stone awl. This little girl was only about the height of his waist. It was obvious that she was still a young girl. However, she raised a stone awl with both hands and easily raised it over her head. She quickly ran past him, as if the stone awl could fly by itself. This wasn't the only stone awl that could fly. The 4 workers were dumbfounded to find that there were 3 other girls active in this big pit. Each of them was holding a stone awl and running with ease, as if the 100-kilogram stone awl was just made of foam. When the 4 workers finally managed to move a stone cone out of the pit, they turned around and prepared to move the other stone cones. However, the pit had already been cleared out. Only a few small stone cones were left in the pit. The rest of the stone cones had all been cleared out by the 4 girls with monstrous strength. Hey, brother, are these the legendary sword maidens? A worker whispered to the burly man. How would I know? The only sword maiden I've seen in my life was Emperor Shroud the Heaven's sword maiden. I've never seen any other sword maidens, but this must be a sword maiden. Otherwise, who would have the strength to do this? I'll leave the rest to you. Once you've finished digging the foundation, report to Anubis. Understood. Guhan suddenly walked up to them and said, Yes, sir. Don't worry, sir. We promise to complete the task. The 4 workers said in unison. The most painful and difficult task had already been completed by Guhan. The rest of the work was just a drizzle. There was no problem at all. After that, Guhan completed a series of tasks, such as injecting 50,000 sword essences into the dimensional wall that covered the entire construction site, patrolling the outer perimeter of the dimensional wall twice, and eliminating a group of Yuan Ku wandering nearby. It took him 4 hours to complete all the tasks from the 1st to the 20th. According to the statistics on the forum, the fastest time to complete the tasks from the 1st to the 20th was 8 hours. Guhan had shortened the time by half. Unfortunately, there was no reward for this, and he did not break any records. He returned to Zhe Tianzhendi's room with the completed tasks from the 1st to the 20th. Zhe Tianzhendi was still sitting there, his face expressionless. It was as if nothing had changed since Guhan had left. However, when he saw the empty task list in Guhan's hands, he finally turned to look at Guhan. "You're not bad." "Very good." Zhe Tianzhendi's reply was quite simple, and there was no change in his emotions. However, from the way he used the words "not bad" and "very good," Zhe Tianzhendi's impression of Guhan had increased quite a bit. "Now, finish the rest of the tasks as well." As soon as Zhe Tianzhendi finished speaking, the tasks from the 21st to the 40th, which were originally grey, became white on the list in Guhan's hands. Guhan could keenly sense that this was somewhat different from the guides on the forum. Guhan clearly remembered that there had been players who had completed all the tasks from the 1st to the 20th in one go. However, after they had completed the tasks, they had only unlocked the tasks from the 21st to the 30th. However, Guhan had unlocked the tasks from the 21st to the 40th. This meant that Guhan's impression of Zhe Tianzhendi had reached the level of treating him like an arm for the 31st to the 40th. This sounded like a good thing, but it was completely different from the analysis in the guides on the forum. According to the data in the guides, only after completing at least 25 tasks would Zhe Tianzhendi's impression of him reach the level of treating him like an arm. Even if Anubis' good words had helped him accumulate a bit of Zhe Tianzhendi's impression of him, it was not enough for Guhan to reach the level of treating him like an arm in advance. There must be something I didn't notice. Guhan turned his head to look at Zhe Tianzhendi, who had his back to him. His heart was filled with doubts. Compared to the tasks from the 1st to the 20th, the difficulty of the 21st to the 40th increased exponentially. There were no longer simple tasks like digging holes or patrolling the area. Instead, they required Guhan to leave the dimensional barrier and venture deep into the surrounding ruins to engage in dangerous exploration and combat. In order to save as much time as possible, Guhan did his best to complete every task. He did not even let go of Jiyu Yun's strength. For example, there was a very annoying fish-catching task. It required the sword-bearer to enter the Gan River and catch a large blue and white fish for Bastet. Guhan was certain that Bastet had added this task into the list. This cat wanted to eat fish, but it had asked the poor sword-bearer to catch fish for it. The large blue and white fish possessed terrifying speed in the river. It was said that it was faster than a high-speed train at full speed. If a sword-bearer wanted to catch a large blue and white fish, they could only set up a trap in advance, lure the fish into the trap, and then use a net to catch it. The entire process of setting up the trap and luring the fish into the trap would take more than an hour. If there was even the slightest mistake in the process, the clever blue and white fish would immediately escape, not giving the sword-bearer a chance to catch it. To deal with such a fish, even Jiyu Han himself did not have the confidence to do so. Let me tell everyone a secret. Guhan had a huge weakness, which was that he did not know how to swim. Although Guhan would not drown if he fell into the water, he could not learn how to swim no matter what. At most, he could only move bit by bit like a dog paddle. He could not move as fast as he could on land. Therefore, this task was naturally given to Jiyu Yun, who had an unexpected ability to catch fish. On the day this loli was born, she jumped into the fish tank by herself and caught the blue and white fish in the fish tank. Her love for fish could be seen from this. As expected, when Guhan asked Jiyu Yun to complete this task, Jiyu Yun readily agreed. She quickly took off all her clothes, leaving only a pair of pink underwear on her butt. Sigh, the loli's butt is a little shriveled, and it doesn't look sexy at all. Those who can be sexy are all perverted lolicons. We have to hand these people over to the police. Next was Jiyu Yun's solo performance. After she jumped into the Gan River, the entire Gan River boiled. God knows what she did in the water, but the fish in the river scrambled to jump out of the water. They seemed to be willing to jump to the shore and die of dehydration than stay in the water. After these small fish, the Yuan Ku living in the water also began to become restless. Guhan saw at least 20 to 30 dimensional whirlpools rise on the surface of the river. Each dimensional whirlpool represented a marine Yuan Ku dying in Jiyu Yun's hands. After this torment for more than 10 minutes, The big blue and white fish in the river finally couldn't hold it in anymore. A big blue and gold fish that was 5 meters long leaped out of the water. This jump was more than 20 meters high, equivalent to the height of a 5-story building. The blue scales reflected a dazzling golden light, but what was even more dazzling was the big blue and white fish's tail. A cute little loli, who was only 1/5 the size of the big blue and white flowerfish, was biting down on the tail of the big blue and white flowerfish with her little canine teeth. Even though she was only 1/5 the size of the big blue and white flowerfish, she looked like she was going to eat the whole big blue and white flowerfish into her stomach. Good spirit, Guhan praised. Then, with a wave of sword energy, he pulled the big blue and white fish and Jiu Yun to his side. Don't eat it. This is for Bastet. Even though Jiu Yun was biting the fish's tail, Guhan still forced Jiu Yun's mouth open and saved the pitiful big blue and white fish, stuffing it into his dimensional pocket. Bastet, I'm going to eat you. Looking at the delicious and super large blue and white flower fish in the distance, Jiu Yun let out a mournful cry in her heart. Then, the white cat, who was catching fish in a small river outside Yangjing City, suddenly shuddered, as if it had been targeted by someone. Chapter 725. Is that Yuzhang dude in here? In the prison of the Commission for Discipline Inspection, a man in a well-ironed suit with a body as thin as a bamboo pole came to the door of a single cell and asked the staff member guarding here. Who are you? Why are you asking this? The guard asked cautiously. At the same time, he touched the wall beside him. There was a button there. With a light press of the button, dozens of lasers would pierce through everything in front of the guard. Don't be nervous. Is there anyone in this world who dares to cause trouble in Yangjing City's Commission for Discipline Inspection? The skinny man would smile and raise his hand, projecting a document from his personal terminal in front of the staff member. So you're from the Sword Pavilion. The guard relaxed. You were sent by Sword Immortal Tianheng. That's right. The skinny man nodded. It's good that you know this. You can't tell anyone else. I understand. The guard said tactfully. His many years of experience working in the Commission for Discipline Inspection told him that the laws and regulations were effective most of the time. However, when faced with a powerful figure like a Sword Immortal, the laws and regulations were ineffective. Very good. Sword Immortal Tianheng has ordered that he wants to ask this Yuzhang dude some questions. Open the cell door, the skinny man said to the guard. The bamboo-like man said to the staff. Without saying anything, the staff immediately knocked on a certain position on the cell door 5 times in a certain rhythm, and the cell door opened with a click. Who are you? Are you here to interrogate me? Where's my shosho? Feeling the cell door open, Ku Rock-in, who had been locked up for more than 10 hours, finally saw a living person. He immediately stood up. In his excitement, he looked at the skinny man cautiously. Behind Ku Rock-in was a girl who looked exactly like Yu Wang. However, this girl seemed to be deliberately keeping a large distance from Ku Rock-in. Here. The skinny man didn't say anything. Instead, he took out an object about the size of a pocket watch from his pocket and threw it in front of Ku Rock-in. Then, the skinny man left the cell without looking back. The cell door slammed shut once again. What is he trying to do? What did they do to my shosho? Ku Rock-in foolishly said to himself. He squatted down and picked up the pocket watch-sized thing left behind by the bamboo-like man. He held it in his hand and took a look. It seemed to be an electronic device with a screen inside. There was no other display on the screen, only 1/6 of the circle that kept extending outwards. Why does this look like a communication signal? Upon seeing this symbol, Ju Elvren's heart jolted, and he suddenly thought of something. He immediately checked his personal terminal. Sure enough, there was no communication signal on his personal terminal. At this time, the communication signal had quietly become full. This is something that can break through the network blockade and allow me to contact the outside world. Is that person here to help me? No matter what this person's purpose was, if he could get Ku Rock-in to contact the outside world, then he could get help from Yuzhang City, so that Yuzhang City could get the latest news about him at any time. Therefore, the first thing Ku Rock-in did after recovering his communication was to get ready to contact his direct superior, the dean of Yuzhang University, roaring tiger sword spirit. However, the strange thing was that although the communication signal was full, when Ku Rokin broadcast his communication signal, it still indicated that Ku Rokin could not unplug it and the communication was restricted. Could it be that this communication is aimed at the network? When Ku Rokin thought of this, he immediately took out a game helmet from his dimensional pocket. After thinking about it, Ku Rokin suddenly took out another game helmet and handed one of the game helmets to King Yu Go Zhenjian, who was standing behind him. King Yu, staying here is too boring. Why don't you enter the game and experience the wider world? Ku Rokin suggested. King Yu Go Zhenjian was silent for a moment. Then, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the game helmet in front of him. One last quest left. It was now the 18th hour of the dungeon. Out of the 40 quests on the quest list, only one was left uncompleted. It was a rescue quest. A group of construction workers from Yangjing City to Yuzhang City had suddenly disappeared when they approached Yuzhang City. The two famed swordsmen who were protecting them had also disappeared. That was why Zetian Jendi hoped that Guhan could at least determine whether the workers were dead or alive. If they were dead, then bury them on the spot. If they were alive, then rescue the workers. Without a strategy, this quest was very difficult to complete because the workers were hidden in a very secluded place. Unless a lot of time was spent searching, it was impossible to find the workers. Fortunately, with the efforts of the senior players, the hiding places of the workers had been clearly marked. Guhan easily found the missing workers in a hidden valley. There were originally more than 20 workers, but now there were only 12 of them left. The reason for their disappearance was simple. One of the two famed swordsmen who were escorting them had gotten off the bus to pee. As a result, he was ambushed by Yuan Ku, who was hiding in the bushes. The famed swordwoman did not even have the chance to release her swordwoman before she was bitten on the buttocks by the poisonous Yuan Ku. The poisonous venom was injected into his body, and in less than 10 seconds, the famed swordman was dead. The remaining famed swordman was a good friend and brother to the poisoned famed swordman. He naturally wanted to avenge his dead brother. In the end, after a fight, he died heroically in the hands of Yuan Ku. The escorted workers saw that the situation was not right and began to flee frantically. They were chased by Yuan Ku all the way to this valley. The others either died in the hands of Yuan Ku, or were left behind in the middle of their escape. No one knew where they ran off to. The following plot development was not something that could be described in detail. The poisonous Yuan Ku three-winged sparrow python jumped out when Guhan led the workers away and started a battle with Guhan that was not very thrilling. In less than 10 seconds, the three-winged sparrow python returned to the dimensional whirlpool, and two sword women dropped from its stomach. These two sword women were man-made. If they were natural sword women, these two sword women would follow the call of the sword garret and automatically fly back to the sword garret in Yangjing City. They would not stay in the stomach of this Yuan Ku. Next was the boring process of escorting these sword women back to Yuzhang City. Throughout the journey, Guhan did not say a word, appearing very cold. However, the workers were still chattering non-stop. Amidst these gossips, Ji Yu Han actually heard something that made him a little shocked. First, these workers were not proper Yangjing people, but some prisoners in Yangjing City. They were sent to Yuzhang City by Yangjing City to work for Zetian Jendi, so their words were full of hatred for Yangjing City. And it seemed that they did not know that Guhan and his group were prisoners. The rest of the workers that Guhan saw on the construction site were almost all prisoners in Yangjing City. According to these workers, ever since Yuzhang City started work, 70% of the prison guards in Yangjing City were unemployed. Second, according to all the history books, Zetian Jendi and Yangjing City were basically on good terms. There were only some small conflicts and unhappiness, but they were all harmless things. Overall, Yangjing City gave full support to Zetian Jendi's construction of Yuzhang City. But according to these workers, the higher-ups of Yangjing City wished that 5 or 6 desolate-level Yuan Ku could attack Yuzhang City's construction site at the same time, tearing the construction site and Zetian Jendi to pieces. Moreover, Zetian Jendi's image in the hearts of the people of Yangjing City was terrible, as if Zetian Jendi had done something outrageous. So, even though Yangjing City had thousands of all kinds of construction machinery, none of them were allocated to Zhetianzhendi. As for the manpower, materials, and resources that Zhetianzhendi wanted, Yangjing City had always only given them 10% of the total. Even when a group of people was allocated, they were mostly prisoners in Yangjing City, or some old and weak people who wasted food. Third, and also the point that concerned Guhan the most. According to historical records, this should be the 10th year after the battle between Zhetianzhendi and Heavenly Court. But according to these prisoners, Zhetianzhendi seemed to have ended the battle last year and returned from Heavenly Court. Moreover, the heaven-shrouding Sword Emperor didn't charge in majestically like what was said in history. He didn't charge in majestically and return with a similarly majestically. He didn't even have a single hair on his body. Instead, he escaped with severe injuries. What made Guhan even more incredulous was that Zhetianzhendi's Yuan-2 Avici twin swords were actually broken in this battle. Zhetianzhendi was no longer Zhetianzhendi. Because Zhetianzhendi's immortal sword mothers were Yuan-2 swords. He had only evolved the two immortal sword mothers into Emperor sword mothers after defeating the Avici sword's wielder. Therefore, after the Yuan-2 and Avici dual swords were broken, the heaven-covering Sword Emperor could not even be considered an immortal sword rank sword wielder. Strictly speaking, he was just a spirit sword rank sword wielder. These prisoners also angrily expressed that even if a great grandmaster was reborn, an Emperor sword level sword lady would not be able to repair it. This heaven-covering Sword Emperor could only be a spirit sword level sword wielder for the rest of his life, yet he still had the nerve to shamelessly boast about learning how to build a city from a real Sword Emperor, causing them to die together with him. A broken Emperor sword couldn't be repaired. This was the case 700 years ago, and it was still the same 700 years later. The celestial extinguished sword had been broken for more than 900 years. Countless great grandmasters who led an entire era had spent their entire lives trying to repair this Emperor sword mother, but in the end, it was all for naught. No one had succeeded. Later on, a great grandmaster suggested that if they wanted to repair the Emperor sword mother, they had to use a dimensional crystal of a purer quality. In other words, even Emperor sword mothers couldn't meet the requirements of repairing the Emperor sword mother. Only by finding a dimensional crystal that surpassed Emperor sword mothers could they repair the Emperor sword mother. But it took 200 to 300 years to find an Emperor sword mother. An existence that surpassed Emperor sword mothers. Did something that didn't even have a name really exist in this world? Chapter 726. Guhan did not know whether what the workers said was true or not, but the information in these words could explain many puzzling and inexplicable aspects of Yuzhang City's history. For example, the bad relationship between Yuzhang City and Yangjing City almost started when Yuzhang City was established. The people of Yuzhang City's antipathy towards the people of Yangjing City ran through the entire history of Yuzhang City. This antipathy was passed down from the hearts of the ancestors. Whether it was history books or essays, there were very few records about Zhetianzhendi. Some of the records were even completely lost, as if they had been deliberately deleted. Moreover, the official description of Zhetianzhendi's greatest achievement, which was the Battle of the Heavenly Court, was even scarcer. There were less than 1,000 words, and the records were very sloppy. There were no details. There was only a rough description of when and where the event happened. After that, there was no more information. As a result, many of the descriptions about Zhetianzhendi's Battle of the Heavenly Court were written by novelists. It was 10% true and 90% false. It was even worse than the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. All these clues gave Guhan a faint intuition that what the prison workers said was not false. What they said was the truth of history. There was another very important question. Why would these workers say this to him? When other players completed the dungeon, these prison workers definitely did not talk about this topic. Otherwise, such explosive news would not have not caused a stir on the forum. This information could almost completely overturn the historical image of Zhetianzhendi. It was equivalent to reshaping the history in people's hearts. The waves it would cause would definitely be huge. At least the people of Yuzhang City would never accept this. So, Guhan could almost say with certainty that all the players who had experienced this dungeon had never heard these prison workers say these words. In other words, these words were actually said specifically for Guhan. They were said specifically for Guhan to hear. Yes. This should be the mutated node, Guhan said with certainty. He knew that from this moment on, the direction of the whole dungeon would be different. Without any twists and turns, Guhan brought the remaining 12 workers back to the Yuzhong City construction site and handed them over to Bast. He also handed over the completed tasks to Bast. Very good. You can go look for the boss now. Bast didn't seem to check the status of the mission in detail. He only glanced at the mission items that Guhan handed over, and the mission list for mission numbers 20 to 40 were all completed. I'll make a move first. Lord Bast, Guhan said to Bast as he prepared to go find Shroud Heaven Jendi. If I were you, I would leave here immediately. Seeing Guhan turn around, Bastet suddenly said such an inexplicable sentence, and the hidden meaning in this sentence made Guhan's body tremble unconsciously. What is this Bast trying to tell me? Could it be that Shroud Heaven Jendi? Guhan thought worriedly. She looked at the heartless sword maidens beside her, and suddenly realized that Jiu Yun's expression was a little strange, as if she was constantly avoiding her gaze. Guhan's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately looked into her dimensional pocket. Sure enough, the huge blue and white flower fish was happily jumping in her dimensional pocket. Guhan clearly remembered that she had taken out the big blue and white flower fish when she handed over the mission, but it was still in her dimensional pocket at this moment. It was obvious that someone had secretly sent it back. Others naturally couldn't control her dimensional pocket, and only the sword maidens who were telepathically connected to her could send things from the outside into her dimensional pocket. It must be that Jiu Yun couldn't bear to give the big blue and white flower fish to Bast to eat, so she had secretly kept the big blue and white flower fish. Guhan picked up the mission list in her hand, and deliberately looked at the mission for the big blue and white flower fish. It clearly showed that the mission had been completed. The mission had been completed, but the key item for the mission was still in her hands. This was a little strange. Was this Bast's negligence? Or was he doing it on purpose? Guhan hid all these things in her heart, and with a heart full of doubts, she entered Shroud Heaven Jendi's house again. At this time, Shroud Heaven Jendi was not meditating, but looking at the 8 trigrams in the room, lost in thought. Your Majesty, I have completed missions 20 to 40. Guhan said very respectfully to Shroud Heaven Jendi. Good, very good, I knew that these missions wouldn't be difficult for you. Shroud Heaven Jendi turned around, an inscrutable smile on his face. You've been in Yuzhong City for almost a day. It's been hard on you this whole day, and you've been completing the missions. As expected, Shroud Heaven Jendi's favorability had reached a new level. Otherwise, there was no way Shroud Heaven Jendi would say such words of concern. This was completely different from the Shroud Heaven Jendi that Guhan had met at the beginning of the dungeon. You've been working hard for almost a day, so you don't have to rush to finish the rest of the mission. Just sleep here. Shroud Heaven Jendi generously gave his bed to Guhan, and gestured for Guhan to sleep on his bed. Unfortunately, Guhan was in no mood to sleep. He shook his head, then said to Shroud Heaven Jendi, building Yuzhong City is more important. Your Majesty, if you have any other missions, you can give them to me. I will definitely complete them as soon as possible. What a good boy. Shroud Heaven Jendi was even more satisfied with Guhan. In that case, go and complete the last mission for me. The last mission? Aren't there supposed to be 10 missions? Over the past 200 years, there had never been a sword-bearer who could unlock the 40th to 50th quests, but they were unlocked by Jiu Han. He had thought that these 10 quests would be as the guesses of the guides on the forums, 10 extremely difficult quests. However, when Jiu Han took a closer look at the 10 missions, he was shocked to discover that these 10 missions were actually one mission. Although this mission took up 10 serial numbers, the descriptive text behind each serial number was exactly the same. Repair the Broken Yuan Killer's Avicii Sword. Help Shroud Heaven Jendi repair the Broken Yuan Killer's Avicii Sword. This mission actually required Guhan to repair the Broken Yuan Killer's Avicii Sword. This was something no Grandmaster had been able to do in the past 800 years, and Shroud Heaven Jendi actually wanted Guhan to repair it. Go and find Anubis now. He will tell you what to do. Yesterday, Jendi had gone back to silence after saying that. Guhan knew that Shroud Heaven Jendi would not say anything to him. At the same time, Guhan found that there was a new change on the mission list. After number 41, the words repair the broken Yuan killer's Avicii sword, help Shroud Heaven Jendi repair the broken Yuan killer's Avicii sword had quietly changed to find Anubis and get Anubis' guidance. It turned out that the 10 missions from 41 to 50 were actually the 10 submissions of the last super mission. If all 10 submissions were completed, the entire Yuan killer's Avicii sword would be completed. There was nothing more to say. Guhan turned around and left the hut to find Anubis. When Guhan found Anubis, the husky was hiding in a corner, happily gnawing on a large bison leg bone. The bison bone was as hard as steel, but in Anubis' mouth, it was as crisp as sugar cane. It was easily chewed and swallowed. Master Anubis, His Majesty Shroud Heaven asked me to find you, Guhan said to Anubis. Anubis did not seem to hear Jiu Han's words. Once he was done, he continued to chew on his own bones. Soon, he had swallowed the entire bison bone into his stomach. The size of his stomach did not change at all. It was as if there was a dimensional pocket hidden within his stomach. Master Anubis, His Majesty Shroud Heaven asked me to find you. Just as Anubis was about to chew on the bones of the second bison, the sense of urgency finally forced Jiu Han to stop Anubis from eating. Jiu Han stood in front of Anubis to block him. It had been more than 18 hours since Guhan entered the instance dungeon. The clock should be around 12 o'clock in the afternoon. The Yangjing City Disciplinary Committee had already begun to deal with Ku Rock-in. The Howling Tiger Sword Spirit should have also begun to rescue Ku Rock-in. Logically speaking, Ju Elvrin should be locked up in the prison of the Commission for Discipline Inspection for a few days or even a week or two after he petrified the Pavilion Master of the Sword Tower in Yangjing. However, Ju Elvrin did not actually commit any major mistakes. Synchronizing and coordinating his own Sword Lady was something that the Sword Tower of Yangjing City should cooperate with the Sword Bearer. As long as the Roaring Tiger Sword Spirit argued for what was right and handled it properly, Ju Elvrin might even be released on bail today. Once Ku Rock-in was released from the prison, he could enter the game at any time. When that happened, Yu Wang's consciousness would immediately leave him. So, Guhan could not waste even a second. Woof. Anubis could not avoid it. He stood up helplessly and looked at Guhan with a face covered in dust. There was a pleading look in his eyes, as if he was begging Guhan not to stop him from eating. Master Anubis, His Majesty Shroud Heaven hopes that I can help him repair the broken Yuan 2 Avicii sword. So, he asked me to find you. What should I do now? Although he did not understand why Anubis would beg him for a few bones, he had to complete the quest. Woof, woof, woof. Anubis barked 3 times in a row. The 3 barks seemed to contain different emotions. It was as if there was an increasing sense of despair. After the 3 barks ended, Anubis, who was originally in human form, suddenly transformed into a husky. Anubis then dashed towards an unknown direction with the speed of the wind. Chapter 727. After all, Anubis was a universe-level Yuan Ku. When a universe-level Yuan Ku ran at full speed, even if Guhan's strength was a few times or even a dozen times stronger than an ordinary famed sword-level swordsman, he still wouldn't be able to catch up to him. Soon, the husky would disappear without a trace. However, in less than a few minutes, Jiu Han managed to catch up to the husky that was running away with all its might. However, it wasn't because Guhan was fast enough, but because the husky was getting slower and slower. Finally, it collapsed on the ground, motionless and panting as if it was about to die. Master Anubis, what's wrong? Guhan went up to Anubis with concern and gently stroked its furry head. Woof, woof, woof. Anubis only barked weakly. No matter how much Guhan tried to persuade it, it still refused to say a word. Such a stalemate made Guhan more and more anxious. Stupid dog, just tell him. Don't joke around with your life. Bast suddenly appeared out of nowhere and walked to the side of Jiu-Han and Anubis. He said to Anubis with a bitter smile, "Woof, woof, woof." Anubis barked 3 more times. These 3 simple barks made Bast nod repeatedly, as if it was communicating in dog language. Woof. Bast also barked. This was actually quite a funny thing. Bast was a purebred white cat, and cats and dogs were notoriously hostile to each other. Wasn't it funny to let a cat bark like a dog? However, after hearing Bast's barking, Anubis, whose chest was heaving up and down excitedly, completely calmed down. He suddenly opened his mouth and spat out something. "Take this and follow me," Bast said to Guhan. "This is." Guhan looked at the thing that Anubis spat out. It was a grayish-black metal strip that looked a little strange. It felt familiar. Wait, isn't this the key to my house? Guhan suddenly remembered that this grayish-black strip was exactly the same as the key to Guhan's house that Yi Qing had given him in Chongyang Mountain. At that time, Yi Qing had given Guhan 2 boxes at the same time. One of the boxes contained the 6 transformations elixir that could save Yuzhong City, and the other box contained the key to Guhan's house. A key that even Guhan didn't know where. If this strip is really the key, then its weight should be. Guhan used his 4 fingers to clamp the key on the ground and used all his strength to grab it. The key did not budge at all. As expected, this seemingly weightless item was terrifyingly heavy. It was at least 50,000 kilograms. Now, Guhan was certain that the strip that Bast had spat out was the key that Yi Qing had given him in Chongyang Mountain. Only that key, which was made from a fragment of a white dwarf, could have such a terrifying weight. So this key was originally hidden in Anubis's dog mouth. Could it be that this key originally belonged to Anubis? Guhan felt that the story of this instant's dungeon was becoming more and more beyond his imagination. This instant's dungeon did not simply tell him how to save King Yu. The contents of this instant's dungeon might be related to himself, his family, and the various secrets hidden between Zhitian Jendi. Yi Qing had once said that before reaching the peak of famed swords, he should not attempt to use his hands to pick up the key. Yi Qing was right. When Guhan borrowed the power of King Yu, Juzi, and the yin-yang swordplay, he barely managed to pick up the key. However, not taking a single step with the key was a huge torture for Guhan. After taking at most 10 steps, Guhan felt that he would die from exhaustion. "You can put it in your dimensional pocket." Bast saw Guhan's embarrassment and reminded him, "But you must remember, this key cannot be stored in the dimensional space for too long, because its existence will cause damage to the dimensional space. Without the protection of a suitable container, your dimensional pocket will completely collapse in less than 3 days, and everything will be lost in the dimensional space." 3 days. Guhan only had 22 hours left in this instant's dungeon. How could he use 3 days? Thus, Guhan put the key into his dimensional pocket. At the same time, he glanced at his mission list and found that Mission 41 had been completed. He was currently working on Mission 42. Find the door, find the tightly shut door. So, Bastet is currently looking for that door on his own? Jiu-Han pondered. Bast opened the void gate and walked in without saying a word. Guhan followed closely behind and entered the void door. The black light and shadow changed. When the void door opened again, Guhan left the void and arrived in a completely unfamiliar area. "All right. It's here." Guhan heard Bast, who was leading the way, say, "This is where the door is." Looking at the surroundings, Guhan had some doubts. At this time, the place where Guhan was standing was clearly a vast jungle. There were only some ruins of buildings left from before the apocalypse, as well as endless tall trees. Apart from that, there was nothing else. How could there be a door hidden here? "Lord Bast, may I ask where the door is?" Guhan turned to ask Bast. At this time, Guhan realized that Bast, who was not far from him, had now quietly opened up a distance of more than a few hundred meters. "Ha ha ha ha. The Real Gate is thousands of miles away. You'll never be able to find it." Bast laughed mockingly. In the next second, the cat god opened the void door and jumped through it at lightning speed, instantly disappearing in front of Guhan. Because Bast used the void gate to leave, Jiu Han could not catch up to him even if he wanted to. Not good. This cunning old cat has brought me to the wrong place, Gu Han cried in his heart. Thinking of how Anubis had run away from him and Bast's strange behavior throughout the whole process, Gu Han was almost certain. Although Bast and Anubis were still very respectful to this Heaven's Sword Emperor, calling him boss and carrying out all of his orders, there was definitely a deep rift between the two. Anubis and Bast didn't seem to want the Yuan-Tu and Avicii swords to be repaired, and were instead thinking of ways to ruin this matter. This did not seem strange. The three gods of Egypt were originally forced to follow Jetian Jendi because their divinities were in the hands of Jetian Jendi. It was very normal for them not to want Jetian Jendi's sword of Avicii to be repaired. But in reality, Gu Han and the three gods of Egypt had lived under the same roof for more than 20 days. He also had a certain understanding of these three guys. Gu Han was sure that although the three gods of Egypt were full of complaints about Yi Qing in reality, they respected Yi Qing from the bottom of their hearts. They were sincerely convinced and full of nostalgia. They would never want Yi Qing's sword of Avicii to be broken just like that. There's something strange here. There must be a big problem. But what exactly is the problem? Gu Han's mind was full of doubts. Unfortunately, with the information that Gu Han currently had, he could not solve these doubts at all. What he could do now was to find the door. Only by finding the door and opening it could it be possible to know what happened inside. However, it was clear that Basts was leading him in the opposite direction. The gate could not possibly be nearby. This made things very difficult for Gu Han. Only God knew where the real location of the door was. Unless Gu Han searched every piece of land in the vicinity, it was absolutely impossible to find the real location of the door. Calm down. What I need now is your wisdom. Gu Han emptied his thoughts and calmed his brain as much as possible. Then, he took out a map from his dimensional pocket. This was a map of Yuzhang City, but it was not a map of Yuzhang City 700 years ago, but a map of modern Yuzhang City. This map could not show the environmental characteristics of 700 years ago. However, although the environmental characteristics were different, the geographical characteristics were exactly the same. The names of places could be changed, and the rivers, lakes, and grass could also be changed, but the entire terrain could not be changed. And the most important thing was that the location of the core area of Yuzhang City had never changed, which meant that Gu Han's starting point was the same on this map. Gu Han's starting point was the hut where Jetian Jendi stayed. I don't know if everyone still remembers the hut at the ground entrance of the Emergency Response Center. Bastet once said in a very nostalgic tone that the hut was built by him and Jetian Jendi together. In fact, when Gu Han first saw the hut in the Instance Dungeon, he had already determined that this hut was the same hut as the one at the ground entrance of the Emergency Response Center. This way, Gu Han could determine his starting point. Then, Gu Han took out a pen and placed the tip of the pen at the starting point. Then, he closed his eyes and began to recall the path he had taken. How many times did he change directions? Where did he change directions? How far did he travel each time he changed directions? Relying on his insane memory, Gu Han completely and accurately restored the entire route of his actions on the map. Finally, the tip of the pen stopped at a certain location. This is. Gu Han looked at the last landing point on the map and was surprised to find that he was on the Miling mountain range. Looking at the location, it was exactly where Gu Han had his bones and organs shattered by Medusa on the Miling mountain range. He was on the verge of death and had to rely on Medusa's petrification to save his life. Yes, under Gu Han's feet was one of the largest dimensional crystal veins in Yuzhang City, the Luoting vein. Chapter 728. It's exactly the location of the Luoting mineral vein. Looking at the spot on the map, Gu Han fell into deep thought. If it was as Bast had said, that he had deliberately led him to a completely wrong place, a place thousands of miles away from the real location of the gate, wouldn't it be too much of a coincidence? He had randomly found a place, and it was the richest vein of the dimensional crystal mine in Yuzhang City. The probability of this was almost the same as winning 5 million in the lottery. No. This is definitely not a matter of luck. Could it be that this cat is lying to me? Guhan suddenly thought of a possibility. Bast had told Guhan that the Real Gate was thousands of miles away. Was the gate really thousands of miles away? Was this cunning white cat trying to mislead them? Most of the people, especially the smart ones, when they heard Bast's words, their first reaction was to leave this place immediately and search for the door in other places. The smarter they were, the more ideas they would have, and the more places they would be able to guess. They would never have thought that Bast might have brought them to the real location. This was the so-called it was darkest under the light and the most dangerous place is the safest place. Thinking of this, Guhan immediately began to search the surrounding area. He searched very carefully and the area was small. It was in the area where Bast had stopped. Guhan's idea was very simple. He was 70% sure that Bast was trying to be smart. The gate was nearby. If he guessed wrong, there was nothing he could do. It was better than searching the entire surrounding area of Yuzhang City. Suddenly, he found something strange on a tree next to him. He found that a piece of bark on the trunk of the tree had been peeled off, revealing a small square piece of yellow wood. The shape of this yellow wood was exactly the same as the jasper ring that Yi Qing had left on his finger. Could this be the entrance to the gate? Ji Yuhan placed the green jade ring on his finger into the groove of the damaged bark. As expected, it fit perfectly and was connected to the tree bark. The next second, the trunk of the big tree suddenly turned, and a piece of bark moved down, revealing an entrance that was only big enough for one person to enter. Therefore, without any hesitation, he jumped directly into the hole. Deities are indeed slaves of fate. As Guhan entered the tree hole, another void gate opened in the air behind Guhan. Bast's head poked out of the void gate and silently watched as Guhan entered the tree hole. The interior of the tree hole was very similar to the emergency evacuation system, which was connected to a slide. Guhan didn't know how long he had been sliding. When he landed on the ground again, it was already 3 to 4 minutes later. It's too dark. If only there were some lights. As soon as Guhan said that, the entire world became bright. Countless fluorescent tubes lit up the entire underground world as if it was daytime. It was a hall. This hall was very similar to the entrance to the Ibis temple, the lair of the 3 Egyptian gods that Guhan had been to before. It was an empty hall with a tightly shut door. Guhan picked up the mission list in his hand and found that mission number 42 had indeed been completed. Currently, mission number 43 was in progress. The mission description was very simple, with only 4 words. Open the door. Guhan walked to the front of the door and observed it carefully. He found that this door did not require any complicated and cumbersome opening method like the Ibis temple. The keyhole was simply placed in the center of the door. As long as the key was inserted, the door would open. Taking out the white dwarf key from his dimensional pocket, this key was simply too heavy. Guhan's hand that was holding the key trembled uncontrollably. He hovered around the keyhole for a long time, but he still couldn't insert the white dwarf key. I believe that everyone has experienced this in their daily lives. The key is obviously in your hand, but you can't insert it no matter what. If you let go, the key will fly in by itself. Guhan suddenly heard a voice beside his ear. However, this voice did not come from the outside world, but from within his own body. This was Yi Qian's voice. Following Yi Qian's words, Guhan loosened his grip on the heart-shaped key. Sure enough, the key floated in the air by itself. As if attracted by the keyhole, it slowly inserted itself into the keyhole. When the entire white dwarf key was inserted, the door let out a creaking sound. Soon after, it slowly opened to both sides, revealing the world behind the door to Guhan. When the door opened, the key automatically flew out from the keyhole and was placed back into Guhan's dimensional pocket. Let me out. Guhan suddenly heard Yi Qian say this to him. Soon after, Yi Qian was released from her sword form. That's right, it's here. It's here. The world behind the door seemed to have triggered some of Yi Qian's memories. She staggered into the world behind the door, touching every blade of grass, every tree, every piece of furniture. This really is a home. Just like how Yi Qing once told Guhan that this was Guhan's home, the world behind the door was indeed a home. There were tables, chairs, a sofa, a coffee table, a wardrobe, a shoe cabinet, a rocking chair, a king-sized bed and so on. There were also televisions, refrigerators, computers, air conditioners, and other household appliances. Behind the door was a warm and comfortable home. It had everything a home should have. The only thing it lacked was people. However, what made Guhan curious was that this home was not decorated like a normal home. In the thousands of years of human history, once a home was big, it would be divided into various rooms. There were bedrooms, kitchens, bathrooms, gyms, entertainment rooms, and so on. However, this home did not have any rooms. Everything was placed in a huge room without any barriers. It was as if the home was in a gymnasium. Yi Tian, have you been here before? Seeing that Yi Tian was still immersed in this home, Guhan asked very directly. He knew nothing about this home. He did not know what secrets were hidden here, so he hoped that Yi Tian would be able to tell him something. I don't know. I don't know anything. Yi Tian suddenly squatted down and hugged her head. Her expression was very painful, as if she was about to explode. I feel that everything here is so familiar, but whenever I try to remember something, I can't remember anything. It's so painful, my head is about to explode. I get it. Looks like Yi Tian's memories of this place have been purposely deleted, but she must have lived here for a very long time. That's why even if the memories in her mind have been deleted, the memories stored in her body are still preserved. Everyone always thought that only the human brain could store memories, but in reality, the human body could also store memories. It was just like how you could move freely in a familiar environment with your eyes closed, or how you could quickly type a manuscript on the keyboard. Although Yi Tian's memories were gone, her body still remembered this place. Yi Tian is Zhe Tianzhendi's sword mistress, which means that she must have lived here with Zhe Tianzhendi for a period of time. That's why her body remembers this place. Through Yi Tian's behavior, Guhan instantly guessed a lot of things. He also had a lot of questions in his mind. If this is where Yi Tian and Yi Qing used to live, then why did Yi Qing tell me that this white dwarf key is the key to my home? This is clearly Yi Qing's home, Guhan silently thought, but in his heart, he already had a vague answer. This could be Yi Qing's home, or it could be Guhan's home. If Yi Qing and Guhan had lived together in this place before. Let me out. Let us out. Why can Yi Tian go out by herself? We want to come out too. Ji Yun, who was in the Zifu, was unhappy and shouted that she wanted to come out. Although Yu Wang did not say anything, Guhan believed that she was also imagining it. Therefore, Guhan decided to release the 3 jealous sword mistresses together with Juzi. I've been here before. Unexpectedly, the moment Ji Yun jumped out, she immediately pointed at the empty house and said loudly, "Big brother, I've really been here before. I've even lived here for a long time. But that's not right. When did I come here? Ouch, ouch, ouch. I've really been here before. Why did Ji Yun think that she had been here before? Oh, right. Ji Yun's previous identity was Yu Chang's sword. Zhe Tianzhendi's sword mistress was Yu Chang's sword. She had lived here before, so it was normal for her to have memories of this place. However, it seemed that Yu Chang's sword's memories of this place had also been deleted. Just like Yi Tian, only her body's memories were left. I've also been here before. Immediately after Ji Yun, King Yu actually said something like this. This was strange. Guhan could guarantee that King Yu had never been shrouding the heavens Zhendi's sword maiden, so why did she also have memories of this place? Could it be that the wielder of the Yu King Go Zhen Zhen had brought the Yu King Go Zhen 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 to visit Zhe Tianzhendi? But that didn't seem right. If it was just a visit from a friend, then the Yu King Go Zhen Zhen had only stayed here for a few days at most. It was impossible for him to have any memory of this place. If King Yu and Ji Yun had memories of this place, then it was reasonable. But when the expressionless Juzi suddenly told Guhan that she also had memories of this place, Guhan was completely confused. Juzi was different from other sword maidens. Guhan was 100% sure that he was the first sword wielder in Juzi's life. Before this, she had never synchronized with any other sword wielder. This meant that when Juzi was a sword maiden, she only had memories of living with Guhan. She definitely didn't have any other memories. In other words, Juzi could only have memories of less than 40 days since the invasion of Yuzhang City. It was impossible for her to have memories from 700 years ago. But Juzi would never lie to her sword maiden. So the question was, where did Juzi's memories of this place come from? Could it really have come from the future? Chapter 729. What happened next clearly proved that Guhan's sword maidens had indeed lived here before. For example, Yi Tian told Guhan that she always felt that there was something strange under the bed, and then Guhan found an embarrassing photo album under the bed. Another example was King Yu telling Guhan that he felt that there was something creepy in the corner of the wall. Then, Guhan found a mouse hole in the corner of the wall, and a large group of living mice lived in it. Ji Yu-yun also told Guhan that there were some very cute things hidden in the cupboard. Then, Guhan found a large blue and white fish pillow in the cupboard. Ji Yu-yun instantly pounced on the blue and white fish pillow and hugged it tightly. She would not let go no matter what, and looked like she wanted to take a few more bites. Actually, Ji Yu-yun's appearance here was also very mysterious, because Guhan did not seem to synchronize with the Duyu sword in the game. Guhan only remembered this after a long time. Later, after asking Ji Yu-yun, he found out that she seemed to have entered the game with Yi Tian. Could this be the magical effect of the yin-yang sword technique? Guhan shook his head, and he was getting more and more confused about these things. The most shocking news was revealed by Juzi. She suddenly told Guhan that in the chef's drawer under the television, there was Guhan's favorite thing. When Guhan instinctively felt that something was wrong, Ji Yu-yun was the first to rush over, open the drawer, and rummaged through a large pile of optical discs. To modern people, optical discs were a very ancient thing. This kind of storage medium that had gradually been eliminated before the apocalypse could often be sold for an absolute high price in modern society. In the antique market, a disc from before the apocalypse, as long as the contents of the disc could still be read, could be sold for at least 400,000 yuan. There were at least 30 of these discs in Yi Qing's house. A rough estimate would be more than 12 million yuan. Unfortunately, these discs only existed in the game, and not in reality. But what was strange was that the surface of these discs were not like normal discs. There were some portraits of the characters and the names of the films on the discs. They were all printed in white and had no words on them. Let Ji Yu-yun see if there's anything good in this disc. Ji Yu-yun had never come into contact with old appliances like VCD and DVD, but she was very skilled in operating them. She turned them on, connected them to the power supply, took them out of the storage, put in the CD, put in the storage, and connected the video source. The whole process was done in one go. In less than 5 seconds, the contents of the CD appeared on the TV. A simple room appeared in the TV. There was a sofa in the room, and a beautiful woman wearing black stockings and light blue business attire was sitting on the sofa. Then, this beautiful woman began to speak to the camera in a language that no one could understand. This is Japanese. Guhan could vaguely distinguish the origin of this language, but Guhan couldn't figure out why Yi Qing's home had a Japanese CD. Could it be that Yi Qing was learning Japanese? Fast forward, fast forward. The content in the first 10 minutes is the most boring. It's not interesting at all. Ji Yu-yun pressed the fast-forward button very skillfully. She seemed to know that the CD would start with 10 minutes of boring content. When the video was fast-forwarded to a certain time, Ji Yu-yun pressed the play button accurately. A shirtless man wearing only shorts appeared in the video. He sat on the beauty's body and then began to do something indescribable. Pa. Guhan snatched the remote control from Ji Yu-yun's hand at lightning speed. He quickly pressed the exit button, took out the CD inside, and stuffed it back into the drawer. Okay. Don't touch the things in here. You'll destroy important clues. Guhan was afraid that these clowns would find something inexplicable, so he clearly gave such an order to his sword lady, which caused strong dissatisfaction among some of the sword ladies. After giving his sword lady the order, Guhan quickly went to look at the mission list to see what he should do next. Mission number 44 wrote, after opening the door, find the saint seed in the room. Saint seed. Guhan's eyes lit up when he saw these 3 words. This was a term that Guhan had never seen before. There was no such term in all the books that Guhan had read. However, Guhan vaguely guessed the meaning of this term when he saw the name of the saint seed. This saint seed had to be a dimensional crystal that was above the emperor seed. It was also the only dimensional crystal that could repair an emperor sword-level sword lady. The dimensional crystal, which had not been invented by humans for thousands of years and only existed in the imagination, actually existed in this world and was once in the hands of the heaven-shrouding sword emperor. Since the mission book said that the saint seed was hidden in this room, the saint seed must be in this room. Therefore, Guhan immediately mobilized his sword ladies to search the room for the possible existence of the saint seed dimensional crystal. There was no need to describe the search process in detail. Anyway, Guhan's sword ladies were not polite to the room and turned everything inside out like robbers. They found a lot of very interesting and indescribable things, but there was no trace of the saint seed at all. Unknowingly, they searched for more than half an hour. King Yu and the rest had turned the entire room inside out 3 times, but they still did not find anything. Therefore, Guhan simply ordered everyone to stop and called everyone to his side. Although I don't know why everyone has a familiar feeling about this place, I believe this feeling can't be wrong. You should have lived here for a period of time. Now, I hope that everyone doesn't search with their naked eyes. Instead, close your eyes and search with your body's memory. Let your body tell you where the precious saint seed is hidden. Under the situation where searching with the naked eye was useless, Guhan could only place his hope on the sword lady's body's memory. Under Guhan's command, even the noisy Ji Yun closed her eyes and tried to grasp that inconceivable feeling. This kind of search that was similar to meditation lasted for a long time. Suddenly, Yi Tian opened her eyes. I feel it. The most precious thing is within our reach, but we've been neglecting it. Yi Tian's words sounded mysterious. What did she mean by a place within our reach but we've been neglecting it? Guhan stood up and looked around the room again. He began to talk to himself in his mind. The place that we've been neglecting means that we've never looked for it. But everything here has been searched by King Yu and the rest. I've also used sword qi to explore the ground. All the ground is solid. There's definitely no basement or hidden compartment. Could it be that the saint seed is hidden in the furniture? Then wouldn't I have to grind all the furniture to pieces to find the saint seed? But if I do that, I'll definitely destroy Zetian Gendi's home. Actually, it's not a big deal if it's destroyed. It's just a dungeon. But why is it that every time I want to make a move, my heart keeps stopping me? Yes, Guhan had long suspected that the precious saint seed might be hidden in the furniture. So when the first search was fruitless, Guhan thought of using sword qi to grind all the furniture to see if the saint seed was hidden in the furniture. However, every time Guhan wanted to make a move, his heart would involuntarily produce a resistance. It was as if Guhan's heart was telling Guhan that the thing inside could not be harmed at all. It was his most precious thing. There's no other way. Looks like I can only go against my heart. Guhan pulled out the Qing pin sword and prepared to grind all the furniture into powder with sword qi. This was because all the sword ladies were in a state of liberation. The only one that was not liberated was the Qing pin sword that was still bound in sword form. Idiot Guhan! Hand over the treasure on you. Just as Guhan was about to make a move, Qing Pin suddenly spoke with her baby voice that was filled with desire. Qing Pin seems a little strange. When Guhan heard Qing Pin's voice that was filled with desire, he immediately frowned. This was because Qing Pin seemed to be in a hurry to obtain something on him. Qing Pin, what do you want? What treasure do I have? Guhan asked curiously. Good treasure. Good treasure. Guhan suddenly felt as if he was hallucinating. There were 2 voices in his ears at the same time. These 2 voices were both Qing Pin's, but one was childish while the other was mature. Guhan had heard these 2 voices before. The childish voice was Qing Pin's original voice, while the mature voice reminded Guhan of the young girl Qing Pin that he had met here 700 years later. Qing Pin, wake up. In the face of the sudden appearance of the young girl's poverty, Ji Yuhan suddenly poured a violent stream of sword essence into the poverty sword, and then a violent stream of sword qi rushed out of the door, causing the stone wall outside to shake violently. What's wrong with me? With the help of the sword essence, Qing Pin trembled. The young girl Qing Pin's accent instantly disappeared, and Qing Pin's voice returned to its original voice. Is this what I wanted to ask you? Qing Pin, what happened to you just now? Guhan asked with concern. Qing Pin doesn't know either. Qing Pin felt that Guhan had something that Qing Pin really wanted. It was something that was very important to Qing Pin. After that, Qing Pin didn't know anything else. Something that Qing Pin really wanted. Ji Yuhan's mind suddenly recalled many of the stories that happened in the Mailing mountain range. Only then did he remember that the poor young girl actually had a mysterious ability. She had an extraordinary ability to sense the dimensional crystal stones. She could easily find the dimensional crystals hidden in the rocks. Moreover, the higher the quality of the dimensional crystal, the greater her reaction. Could it be that the thing that made Qing Pin have such a huge reaction was the sage seed? And the sage seed was hidden in his body? Guhan patted his head and took out the white dwarf key from his dimensional pocket. This is it. Give it to me, Qing Pin said intoxicatedly. It seemed like the sage seed was hidden in this white dwarf key. Chapter 730. Although he had guessed that the sage seed was in the white dwarf key, the problem of how to extract the sage seed from the white dwarf key had become a huge problem. White dwarfs were actually stars, but they were stars that had evolved to the end of their life. Earth's sun was considered a star that was in its middle age. After another 6.5 billion years, our sun would enter the end of its life and gradually become a white dwarf. The reason why a white dwarf, which was the size of a finger, had the weight of a few heavy tanks was because of the high density of matter in its body. If a cubic meter of solid iron was compressed to the size of a cubic centimeter, one could imagine how terrifying the density of a white dwarf was. It was almost impossible to cut open a matter with such a high density. Unless one had a weapon of the same density, one could only consider using brute force to cut it open. In other words, unless Guhan had an emperor's sword, it was impossible to cut open the white dwarf with brute force. If it was in the real world, Guhan could use the Shenyuan sword to try. However, in the game, Guhan was really helpless. Of course, other than using brute force to cut it open, there were other ways. Of course, it was impossible for the sage seed to be naturally hidden in the white dwarf. Someone must have hidden it in the white dwarf, and that person was most likely Zhetian Jendi. Since the sage seed had to be hidden in the white dwarf, a part of the white dwarf must have been cut open and hollowed out before placing the sage seed inside. Therefore, the white dwarf key in Guhan's hand had already been cut open. However, it was cleverly reassembled by Zhetian Jendi. Guhan had to find a way to open the white dwarf key that had been cut open. However, he did not know how Zhetian Jendi had managed to reassemble the cut open part. Guhan lifted the white dwarf with much effort and examined it carefully. However, he could not find any traces of it being cut open. There's no other way. Looks like I can only use that move, Guhan suddenly muttered to himself. While the other sword maidens around him were confused, their bodies turned into rays of light and were forcibly returned by Guhan. What happened? King Yu was shocked to find that the sword ladies around him had all returned to their swords. He was the only one left outside. What do you want to do? King Yu instinctively sensed Guhan's terrible intentions. King Yu, do me a favor, it's time for you to contribute your body. With that, Guhan carried King Yu into his arms, and then the two of them jumped onto the bed. 1,000 words of harmony. In the end, Guhan did not enter King Yu's body. This was because his original goal was not to do anything shameful with King Yu. His original goal was to provoke the flames of lust in his heart and then use the power of the flames to stimulate his green lotus white root body. Without a doubt, Guhan's plan was successful. After playing with King Yu's body for more than 10 minutes, he successfully activated his green lotus white root body. With the help of his 100x vision, he began to observe the possible cracks in the white dwarf key. But King Yu's situation was very bad. This child and Ji Yu Han had at least been husband and wife for more than 30 days. Her body had changed from the cold little dragon girl's virgin body to a tender, juicy, and somewhat flirtatious girl who had eaten the marrow and wanted to taste it. When she was a virgin, being played with by Guhan could quickly extinguish the flames of lust. However, when it came to the flirtatious young lady, the flames would not be extinguished so easily. Anyway, while Guhan was doing his best to observe the white dwarf key, our King Yu was gritting his teeth. One hand was constantly touching his lower body, trying to extinguish the damned flames with water. On the other hand, when the green lotus white root body was activated, Guhan successfully observed the extremely small crack on the white dwarf key. This crack was at least a nanometer level crack. No wonder Guhan couldn't see it with his naked eye. Guhan also couldn't imagine what kind of mystical sword technique could achieve this. At least, with Guhan's own strength, even if Guhan was given a piece of tofu, he wouldn't be able to cut a nanometer level crack. However, there was a new problem. The crack was on the nanoscale, so it was not much different from not having the crack. Unless Ji Han could find a nanoscale needle that was as hard as the white dwarf fragment, he might be able to slowly pick out the white dwarf fragment. However, finding such a needle was much more difficult than finding an emperor's sword. Because there were definitely emperor's swords in this world, but there might not be such a needle. What should I do? This shouldn't be an impossible task. Guhan thought vexedly on the bed. At this moment, King Yu, who was silently accumulating water in his body, was finally about to burst out. Ah! King Yu suddenly let out a high-pitched groan. Then, his entire body straightened like a taut string. His originally bent leg kicked out along with his tensed body. Then, he kicked the back of Guhan, who was sitting in front of him. If it was under normal circumstances, a kick from a leg on Guhan's back would cause Guhan's body to not sway at all. However, Guhan had already entered the green lotus white root body state. More importantly, he was holding the strangely heavy white dwarf key in his hand. His hand was already trembling. When King Yu kicked him, Guhan's body that was 100 times more sensitive began to tremble violently. Then, he uncontrollably loosened his grip on the white dwarf key. The white dwarf key began to free fall and fell right between King Yu's legs. Then, it happened to be shot by the unknown liquid that King Yu had spewed out. The moment it came into contact with the unknown liquid, the white dwarf key suddenly floated in the air. A small square on its rectangular body began to protrude, and then separated from the white dwarf key, revealing a transparent pure white crystal that looked like a high-quality glass. Even with Guhan's calmness, he could not remain calm after seeing this scene. He could not understand how high Yi Qing's sense of humor was for her to set up such a shameful way to open the key. This kind of opening method was something that Ji Han could never imagine in his entire life. If it were not for all these coincidences happening today, Ji Han reckoned that he would never be able to open this white dwarf key in his entire life. Wait. Don't tell me Yi Qing has already divined what just happened. Thinking of this, Guhan felt his paws becoming uneasy. You're not allowed to tell anyone about this for the rest of your life. Otherwise, I'd rather be a sword mistress for that coup rock-in. After the lingering charm faded, King Yu's face became even redder. Guhan believed that King Yu was speaking the truth. If he dared to tell anyone about this, King Yu might really go back to find coup rock-in. Don't worry, even if I die, I won't tell anyone about what happened today, Guhan guaranteed with certainty. He was sincere. At least he was sincere now. After taking out the saint seed from the white dwarf key, Guhan placed the remaining white dwarf fragments into his dimensional pocket. He opened up the mission list again. As expected, mission number 44 was completed and mission number 15 was revealed. Find the furnace of heaven and earth. Meet up with Zhe Tianjendi, who has already arrived there. Let's go. Ji Han brought King Yu, who was still tidying up his clothes, out of this home that all the sword ladies felt extremely familiar with. After taking one last look at the door that was slowly closing, Ji Han and King Yu left without looking back. Where was the furnace of heaven and earth? Guhan didn't know. However, he found a map in King Yu's home. It was a hand-drawn map with delicate lines. Guhan guessed that it was Yi Qing's handiwork. There were no names marked on the map, only simple topography. However, through this terrain, Guhan vaguely recognized the location of the furnace of heaven and earth. This was because there was a circular basin on the map with 8 hills of different shapes distributed according to the positions of the 8 trigrams. Therefore, Guhan guessed that this should be the naturally formed furnace of heaven and earth. However, this location was quite far from where Guhan was. It almost spanned the entire length of the map. After a rough estimation, it was estimated to be more than 200 kilometers away. There were 20 hours left before the end of the instance dungeon. Guhan estimated his speed. If he ran at full speed, he could maintain a constant speed of 30 kilometers per hour. This meant that he would need a total of 8 hours to reach the furnace of heaven and earth. Moreover, it would consume a lot of Guhan's stamina. Guhan estimated that he would only have half of his life left by the time he reached the place. If he were to consider the possibility of encountering Yuan Ku midway and fighting him, Guhan estimated that he would only be able to reach the furnace of heaven and earth within 12 hours. Forget it, there was no time to think about these problems. If he was left with half of his life, then so be it. Half of his life was still a life. It was fine as long as he could not die. Just as Guhan was about to start his marathon, there was a tremor in the air. The gate of the void opened and Bast, who had tried to trick Guhan, appeared in front of Guhan again. You found the sage seed? Bast looked at Guhan and asked hesitantly. I found it. This sage seed is hidden in the white dwarf star key that you gave me. Guhan did not seem to be on guard at all and very honestly told the truth. Is that so? Boss is really an idiot. Bast sneered. Then, he seemed to have let go of a lot of things and said in a resigned tone, Come in, I will use the gate of the void to send you on your way. The furnace of heaven and earth is too far away. I cannot let you exhaust all your stamina. Otherwise, there will be no hope. Chapter 731. After bringing Guhan to the furnace, Bast immediately disappeared into the void gate, unwilling to stay for even a minute longer. Guhan carefully observed the surrounding environment. This furnace was actually a circular crater with a diameter of about 10 kilometers. At the bottom of the crater, he could see a black figure standing there. Guhan fixed his eyes on it. Who else could it be other than the heaven-shrouding Sword Emperor? Zetian Jendi was already waiting for Guhan at the furnace. He seemed very sure that Guhan would be able to complete the quest. Your Majesty. Guhan walked to Zetian Jendi's side and bowed deeply. Did you find the saint seed? Zetian Jendi asked as he stroked his beard. I've found it. Guhan nodded. Good. Very good, in this world, only you can find it. Zetian Jendi looked at Guhan and suddenly revealed a strange smile. Alright, let's not waste any more time. Let's repair the Yuan 2 and ABI sword. Zetian Jendi took out a brocade box from his dimensional pocket. He opened it, revealing the broken pieces of the Yuan 2 and ABI swords. Guhan had seen the 2 swords during the invasion of Yuzhang City, and had even fought with them himself. As such, Guhan could confirm that the 2 broken emperor swords were indeed the Yuan 2 and ABI swords. It was a pity that these 2 sword ladies, who were known to be the strongest sword ladies of the human race and were emperor swords, had fallen to the point where they were broken and became 4 pieces of dull scrap metal. The mission list had also been updated, and it was now the 46th mission, help the heaven-shrouding Sword Emperor repair the broken Yuan-2 and Avicii twin swords. Your Majesty, why aren't there any blacksmiths here? Guhan looked around and found that there were only him and Zetian Jendi. There was no one else. The sword-bearer was in charge of fighting, while the blacksmith was in charge of repairing the sword mistresses. This was common knowledge. Even someone as amazing as Kunzu could not be a sword-bearer and a blacksmith at the same time. Therefore, if one wanted to repair a sword mistress, they needed a blacksmith present. A sword mistress like the Emperor swords needed a grandmaster. Otherwise, no one would be able to bear the risk of failure. My method is very special. I don't need the power of a blacksmith, just the power of the furnace of heaven and earth. Zetian Jendi glanced at Guhan, then suddenly took out a small dagger and made a cut on his wrist. Golden blood immediately flowed out. This is Emperor's blood. Seeing the golden blood, Guhan's eyes shone with surprise. There were quite a number of humans who once held the view that emperor sword wielders were no longer humans and that they should be expelled from the human race. This moronic view was suppressed by the Sword Council on the spot. Humans and sword wielders who held such views were either executed or imprisoned forever until they died. The reason why humans wanted to expel Gendi from the human race was because the blood of emperor swordbearers was no longer bright red. Even after 1,000 years, human scientists still could not figure out why the blood of the sword-bearers of the immortal sword tier would turn golden after they ascended the throne and became the emperor of the immortal sword tier. Although they did not know how emperor's blood was formed, there was no doubt that emperor's blood had many magical abilities. Before the medic pods were invented, sword-bearers who were heavily injured could instantly recover from any serious physical or internal injuries if they consumed a drop of emperor's blood. Swallowing 2 drops would allow him to regrow his limbs, and swallowing 3 drops would allow him to regrow all his limbs, healing all the injuries caused by fighting Yuan Shen. Moreover, emperor's blood had the effect of replenishing lost sword essence in the body. For sword-bearers who were below famous sword level, 1 drop of emperor's blood could replenish all lost sword essence. For spirit sword level sword-bearers, they could replenish about 40%, and for immortal sword level sword-bearers, they could replenish 10%. It was a miracle medicine that could save lives in battle. Therefore, Emperor Sword level swordbearers had the title of living bodhisattva. Every day, a certain amount of their blood would be extracted to make a miracle medicine that could save lives. Most of the other swordbearers would find an Emperor Sword level swordbearer to rely on, hoping to obtain a few drops of Emperor's blood to save their lives at a critical moment. It was a pity that Emperor Sword level swordbearers could not extract large amounts of Emperor's blood, because the ability of Emperor Sword level swordbearers to produce blood was inferior to that of normal humans. Once they lost too much blood, not only would their battle power be greatly reduced, but it would also take a long time for them to recover. According to calculations, extracting 3 drops of Emperor's blood per day for every Gendi was the optimal ratio. If this was exceeded, the Emperor Sword level swordbearers would be severely affected. Later on, with the invention of the medical pods and even more black technology, most of the swordbearers gradually got rid of their dependence on Emperor's blood and relied on the medical pods for emergency treatment. However, Emperor's blood was still very popular. This was because the medical pods required a safe environment for treatment, and Emperor's blood did not require this. It could be quickly healed by directly swallowing it. Such precious Emperor's blood flowed out of Zetian Gendi's body as if it did not cost money, and all of it dripped onto the soil beneath Zetian Gendi. This was not a small amount of Emperor's blood, but a huge amount of Emperor's blood. Guhan estimated that Zetian Gendi had released at least 5,000 cubic centimeters of Emperor's blood, and allowed it to drip onto the soil to stop the wound on his wrist. At that moment, Zetian Gendi's face was pale, and his body was weak. His hair had instantly turned white, and he looked like an old man with 1 foot in the grave. He did not look like Gendi at all. "Your Majesty, please take care." Guhan hurriedly helped Zetian Gendi, who was on the verge of collapsing, up, and said with concern, "I'm fine. I just need some time to recover." Zetian Gendi waved his hand, then looked at the shards of the UN2 and ABI swords beside him, and said weakly, "Come, place the shards where my emperor's blood fell." Guhan noticed that the soil where Zetian Gendi's emperor's blood had turned golden, it was not just a simple stain, but a small piece of soil had completely changed. The loose soil had become a dazzling, shiny gold. Ji Yuhan's hand touched the piece of gold, it felt like solid metal to the touch. The sovereign blood had completely turned the soil into gold. This was a genuine case of turning soil into gold. "Hurry up, don't waste time. When my emperor's blood is at its strongest, place the UN2 and ABI swords on it," Zetian Gendi, who was behind Guhan, urged. Guhan nodded, then picked up the UN2 and ABI swords and placed them on the small piece of gold that had been dyed by the emperor's sword. The moment the emperor's sword touched the piece of gold, something miraculous happened. The small piece of gold suddenly began to spread. Who knew whether it was 1 or 2 seconds, but the entire heaven and earth furnace, which was 10 kilometers in diameter, had turned completely golden. It was no longer a simple pit, but a huge furnace made entirely of pure gold. No wonder this place is called the furnace of heaven and earth. This entire basin is a furnace that needs Emperor's blood to activate, Guhan murmured to himself as he felt the miraculous furnace beneath his feet. Now, take out the saint seed and place it on the Yuan-Tu and Abi sword. Zetian Jendi urged. Only with the power of the furnace of heaven and earth can we refine the saint seed and fuse the Yuan-Tu and Abi swords back together. Hurry up, we can't miss this crucial moment. Yes, Your Majesty. Guhan took out a piece of saint seed that was as bright as glass and placed it on the Yuan-Tu and Abi swords. When he saw this, Zetian Jendi, who had been nervous all this time, let out a sigh of relief. His face seemed to have a tinge of red. Help me get out of here. In 5 minutes, the lava underground will ignite the entire furnace. If we stay here, we'll just turn into a bowl of charcoal, Zetian Jendi said to Guhan. When Guhan heard that they only had 5 minutes, he immediately helped Zetian Jendi up, and quickly walked towards the outside of the furnace of heaven and earth. As they walked, Guhan could feel it very clearly. The furnace of heaven and earth, which had originally been cold to the touch, had started to warm up. When they were halfway there, the warmth had become scorching hot, as if they were in a sauna. When Guhan brought Zetian Jendi to the outside of the furnace of heaven and earth, the furnace of heaven and earth had turned into a pot of boiling oil. The rubber insoles of Guhan's sneakers had all melted, turning into a pile of black paste. Your Majesty, what should I do next? Guhan asked Zetian Jendi. Next? You don't need to do anything else after this. Just wait quietly. The heaven-shrouding sword emperor stood up. He was extremely quick and seemed to have recovered from his weakened state. No more missions. But I haven't completed any missions after number 47. Ji Han took out his mission list and glanced at it. He was surprised to find that mission number 46 was already shown as completed, but mission number 47 was not activated. Strange, could it be that the mission was completed on number 46? Then why did they add numbers 47, 48, 49, and 50? I remember now, you might have some missions that you haven't completed yet. Zetian Jendi, who was standing behind Guhan, slowly lifted his foot and placed it on Guhan's back. Your Majesty, what is the meaning of this? Feeling Zetian Jendi's humiliating kick, Guhan asked angrily. Nothing, I just want you to help me with one last mission. Zetian Jendi's voice suddenly sounded creepy. Guhan sensed that something was wrong and immediately wanted to get up and run. But no matter how fast Guhan's reaction was, he was only a famed sword wielder. How could he be faster than an emperor sword wielder? Therefore, before Guhan could get up, Zetian Jendi had already kicked Guhan into the hellish furnace of heaven and earth. Chapter 732. After being kicked into the furnace of heaven and earth, Guhan's body slid down the smooth surface of the furnace. In the end, he returned to the center of the furnace, where the emperor's blood had fallen and where the broken Yuan-Tu and Avici swords were. As he slid down the furnace, Guhan's clothes had already turned into a pile of ashes. His yellow skin had also turned into charcoal. Faint yellow pus seeped out from his skin. According to medical terms, Guhan's burns had already covered more than 70% of his body. The temperature of the furnace had risen to 500 degrees Celsius, and it was still rising. Even though Guhan's body had been strengthened by the famed sword Maiden, he could only endure temperatures of around 200 degrees Celsius at most. Even if Guhan was possessed by a deity, he would not be able to last long in temperatures that were over 500 degrees Celsius for a long time. Guhan secretly estimated that he would not be able to last for long. In just 3 or 4 minutes, he would be roasted into a dried corpse by the flames of the furnace. Sword of Spring. At the crucial moment, Guhan pointed the tip of heavenly sword at his feet and used the sword of spring from the enigmatic 9 swords. The umbrella-shaped barrier had become Guhan's greatest support. It separated Guhan's body from the surface of the furnace of heaven and earth, preventing Guhan's body from coming into direct contact with the furnace. However, this was not a long-term plan. Every second that the sword of spring was maintained would consume a large amount of Guhan's sword chi. Guhan currently had 38,621 quarks of sword essences stored in his body. The Sword of Spring would consume 100 quarks of sword essences from Guhan per second. Going by this calculation, Guhan could last for another 386 seconds, which was around 6 to 7 minutes. Even though Guhan was separated from the surface of the furnace of heaven and earth, Guhan still had to endure the temperature of 200 degrees Celsius. The water in Guhan's body was quickly excreted as sweat in an attempt to lower Guhan's body temperature. However, it was like trying to put out a burning cart of firewood with a cup of water. If this went on, Guhan's body would be completely drained of water before the Sword of Spring disappeared. Fortunately, Guhan was not completely helpless. Guhan still had quite a lot of purified water stored in his dimensional pocket. The purified water was originally stored in the dimensional pocket as drinking water. He did not expect it to become Guhan's life-saving water. Guhan directly took out a bucket of purified water and inserted a straw into it. A large amount of cold and sweet purified water entered Guhan's throat through the straw. Then, under the guidance of the sword chi in Guhan's body, it quickly flowed into his various organs that were suffering from dehydration. Guhan even skipped the conversion process of sweat, and directly forced the purified water out of his skin through the sweat glands on the surface of his skin, forming small water droplets. This made Guhan's body look like a lotus leaf covered with dew in the morning. Although these dew droplets would evaporate in less than a second due to the high temperature of over 200 degrees, this successfully stopped Guhan's body temperature from rising any further. Guhan estimated that this bucket of purified water could allow Guhan's body to last for about 3 minutes, and there were still 4 or 5 buckets of purified water in Guhan's dimensional pocket. Therefore, Guhan only had 6 or 7 minutes left. Perhaps it was not even 6 or 7 minutes, because the temperature of the furnace of heaven and earth had already risen to 800 degrees, and the temperature of the air had risen to 300 degrees. If Guhan could not find a way to escape from the furnace of heaven and earth within these 6 or 7 minutes, Guhan would definitely die. It's not like there's no way. Guhan looked up at the sky above him. At this moment, he could faintly see an oval-shaped, transparent lid in the sky. This lid had completely covered the furnace of heaven and earth, and not even a trace of air could escape. If not for this lid, Guhan could have used a sword controlling technique like the 9 swords of mysterious heaven, engraved swordsman, to control the heavenly sword to fly and escape with Guhan. Unfortunately, this lid was formed by the heavens and earth, and unless the entire furnace of heaven and earth was destroyed, there was no way to penetrate it. From the looks of it, Jiyu Han was completely trapped here. He was trapped in a hopeless situation where he had no chance of survival. Your Majesty shrouding the heavens. Please don't joke around. Hurry up and save me. In this desperate situation, it seemed that Guhan could only beg shrouding the heavens Jendi, who was outside the furnace of heaven and earth, to save him. I never joke around. Shrouding the heavens Jendi's cold voice rang in Guhan's ears. This is your home. You can die here in peace. Why? Guhan seemed to be on the verge of breaking down. He sounded like he was about to cry. Why does His Majesty want to harm me like this? How did I offend His Majesty? I've completed all the tasks His Majesty gave me these past 2 days without a single mistake. I'm here to help His Majesty. Your death will be the greatest help to me. Shrouding the heavens, Jendi harumphed coldly, a hint of joy in his voice. I didn't think that the person she had been waiting for 50 years was such an idiot. I have to thank you. If it weren't for you, I might never have been able to activate the furnace of heaven and earth. What do you mean? Isn't the furnace of heaven and earth activated by your sovereign blood? Guhan asked curiously. Looks like you don't have any medical knowledge at all. Let me ask you, how much sovereign blood did I release? Shrouding the heavens, Jendi suddenly asked Guhan a strange question. How would I remember such things? Guhan replied in confusion. He didn't seem to understand why shrouding the heavens Jendi would ask him such a question. Then let me tell you, I released at least 5,500 cubic centimeters of sovereign blood. Shrouding the heavens Jendi's voice was still weak. Let me tell you something common sense. Even if he's a Jendi, A normal-sized human would only have 4,800 cubic centimeters of blood. Even if I drained all the sovereign blood in my body, I wouldn't be able to release 5,500 cubic centimeters. I don't understand. What does this mean? Guhan was still confused. Then let me tell you, this means that the sovereign blood that flowed out wasn't mine alone, but two people's. As soon as shrouding the heavens Jendi spoke, Guhan saw a figure fly in from outside the furnace of heaven and earth, crashing towards him. Guhan hurriedly reached out and caught the person in his arms. When he looked closely, Guhan was given a big fright. Qing'er. What's wrong? Qing'er. The person Guhan caught was none other than shrouding the heavens Jendi, Yi Qing. However, this was not the sinister man who had just spoken to Guhan, but the real female Yi Qing. However, unlike the Yi Qing that Guhan had seen before, the Yi Qing in Guhan's arms no longer had the pure and gentle demeanor of a young girl. Instead, she looked like an old woman. Her hair was already white, and her face was full of wrinkles. However, Guhan could feel Yi Qing's bones through her loose skin. Yes, this was the world 56 years after the rise of Hero's Instance Dungeon. Yi Qing was now 70 years old, and a 70-year-old person should look like this. No, that's not right at all. Guhan mumbled to himself, Yi Qing is already an empress. She is Jendi. As long as she is willing, she can always maintain her appearance when she thinks she is at her most beautiful. There has never been a female Jendi who was willing to face the world with an old face. If the person in my arms is the real Qing'er, then who are you? And who is shrouding the heavens Jendi? Guhan asked blankly. I am shrouding the heavens Jendi. Outside the furnace of heaven and earth, the man's voice was still there. She is also shrouding the heavens Jendi. Our fates were once intertwined, but now it is time to end it. From now on, there is only one shrouding the heavens Jendi in this world. You and your Qing'er should go where you belong. In another 50 minutes, the temperature of the furnace of heaven and earth will reach its highest temperature of 108,000 degrees Celsius. Qing'er has waited for you for 50 years, but she did not expect to die with you. I have fulfilled her wish, and I have done a little. Before he could finish listening, Guhan suddenly felt a severe ringing in his ears. Then, shrouding the heavens Jendi, who was outside the furnace of heaven and earth, did not say another word. Damn it! My body is on the verge of collapsing. The ringing in his ears made Guhan realize that his body could not withstand the high temperature any longer. In the 3 minutes that Guhan and shrouding the heavens Jendi talked, the temperature in the furnace of heaven and earth had risen to 1,500 degrees Celsius. This reduced Guhan's original estimate of 6 to 7 minutes to about 4 minutes. 3 minutes had passed, and Guhan only had 1 minute left. Cough, cough, cough. Guhan suddenly coughed, and a stream of water spurted out of his throat. Guhan's esophagus had been burnt by the high temperature, and the purified water that entered Guhan's body through his esophagus was naturally spurting out from this hole. This was only the beginning. In the next 10 seconds, more and more of these burnt holes appeared on Guhan's body. At the same time, Guhan's consciousness became blurred, and it looked like Guhan would not be able to hold on for much longer. Fish. Big blue flower fish. Suddenly, Guhan's half-melted ears seemed to hear this. Big blue flower fish. The moment Ji Yuhan's consciousness was about to completely fade, he instinctively opened his dimensional pocket and released the large blue and white fish in his pocket. Chirp chirp. Although he did not know why a big blue flower fish would make the chirp of a mouse, it became a sound that was like the sound of nature in Guhan's sleep. After the sound rang out, Ji Yuhan felt the temperature around his body begin to drop rapidly, as if he had returned to the normal world. At the same time, a drop of liquid with a fishy smell dripped into Ji Yuhan's mouth. Ji Yuhan felt a wave of comfort throughout his body, and the pain in his body disappeared. What replaced it was an indescribable itch. This itch was more than 1,000 times more painful than the itch caused by a mosquito. Guhan instinctively stretched out his hands, eager to scratch his body. You can't scratch. This is your body recovering. Guhan heard Yi Qing's voice again, but this time it was filled with an aged feeling. Chapter 733. After Who knew how much time had passed, Guhan opened his eyes and found that his body had completely recovered. Even his charred skin had returned to its original color. Additionally, his skin was more delicate, like the skin of a newborn. Guhan could not help but recall how when Mayun looked when she first came out of the medical bay. When he looked again, he saw that the large cyan flowerfish was swimming in the air. It was swimming in a perfect circle around Guhan. Blue, crystal-like snowflakes kept falling down from the scales of the large cyan flowerfish. It seemed that it was because of these snowflakes that the temperature around Guhan had dropped to room temperature. He could no longer feel the shockingly high temperature of the furnace of heaven and earth. Husband. Guhan, you're finally awake. Yi Qing's aged voice rang in his ears. Guhan turned his head and saw Yi Qing sitting peacefully beside him. If it were not for the light of infatuation in her eyes, Guhan would have thought that she was just an old granny next door. You wanted to call me husband, didn't you? Ji Yuhan didn't expect that the first thing he said would be this sentence. However, after thinking about it carefully, ever since the beginning of the Heroes Begin with Insignificance Instance dungeon, every time he met Yi Qing would always call Guhan husband. Just now, Yi Qing had even said the word husband out loud. In the end, she still called Guhan Guhan. Qing wouldn't dare. Yi Qing lowered her head in pain. How could Qing call husband husband in this state? After saying that, Yi Qing's expression became even more pained. Qing is old and weak. I wouldn't dare to blaspheme husband. I am also not fit to be husband's wife. Qing should just call husband Guhan. If it were not for the fact that Guhan did not like to complain, Guhan would have complained about Yi Qing's words. Although she said that she didn't dare to call Guhan husband, she called him husband more than anyone else. However, Yi Qing's husband made Guhan's heart ache. He could imagine how much pain Yi Qing would feel if she didn't even dare to call him husband because of his appearance. From now on, you will still call me husband. Otherwise, I won't say another word to you. Guhan looked at Yi Qing's face and said calmly but firmly, husband. Yi Qing raised her head in surprise. Her wrinkled face had a pair of clear eyes that were as bright as a baby's. She was a little hesitant, but in the end, she still called out tentatively, husband. Guhan nodded and placed one of his hands on Yi Qing's cheeks. Feeling its rough, granny-like skin, his voice suddenly became heavy. I'm here. Thank you, husband. Qing is so happy. Yi Qing, the old granny, laid on Ji Yuhan's leg like a young girl and muttered to herself, husband, why are you so stupid? You jumped step by step into the furnace of heaven and earth. When did you become so stupid? If I didn't jump down on my own, how could I see you? Guhan played with Yi Qing's hair. Yi Qing's body had become extremely old, but her hair, although pale, was full of tenacity like a young girl's hair. Didn't you arrange so much just to make me jump down on my own? Actually, when he first saw Zhi Tianzhendi, Guhan did not suspect Zhi Tianzhendi's identity. Zhi Tianzhendi was very cold to him, and acted as if he didn't know Guhan at all. He didn't show any extra emotions. But at that time, Guhan did not suspect Zhendi at all, because he thought that Yi Qing might have some difficulties. Or perhaps the abnormal node had not been activated, and this storyline dungeon was still a normal storyline dungeon. Zhi Tianzhendi was just a simple NPC, and Yi Qing's memories of the dungeon had not been activated. But when Guhan met Zhi Tianzhendi for the second time, Guhan noticed that something was wrong. In the corner of the room, there was something that looked like broken glass. For a house, this was not something to be suspicious about. Who didn't have some broken glass in their house? But this broken glass had left a deep impression on Guhan. It was not a piece of glass, but a piece of gemstone. This gemstone had an extraordinary meaning to Yi Qing. It was the necklace left behind by Yi Qing's mother. Guhan and Yi Qing had found it at the entrance of the Ibis shrine. Guhan clearly remembered that Yi Qing had hidden the necklace in her bosom. If Zhi Tianzhendi was really Yi Qing, then he would not have treated the necklace like trash. Even if the necklace was accidentally broken, she would have collected all the fragments and treasured them like a treasure. From that moment onwards, Guhan started to doubt whether the Zhi Tianzhendi in front of him was the real Yi Qing or not. What happened next was the strange reactions of Bast and Anubis. When Anubis heard Guhan's request, his first reaction was to run away with the white dwarf key that contained the saint seed. Although Bast persuaded Anubis to spit out the white dwarf key, he still tried to stop Guhan from completing his mission. If it were not for Guhan's quick wits, Guhan would still be searching for that door. Bast also left the big viridescent flower fish for him. Although Guhan did not know why Bast left the big viridescent flower fish for him, now that he saw the safe environment created by the big viridescent flower fish, Guhan would be a complete fool if he still did not understand. What made Guhan the most suspicious was the saint seed. The reason was simple. The saint seed was in Anubis' stomach. Why didn't Zhetien Jendi ask Anubis for it himself? Why did he have to turn around and ask Jiyu Han to do this? Moreover, he wanted Guhan to go to Yi Qing's house. Actually, this was a completely unnecessary step. Going to Yi Qing's house was meaningless to the mission. At that time, Guhan had already guessed that Zhetien Jendi was not Yi Qing at all. He did not know where the saint seed was hidden at all. He might have become Zhetien Jendi's tool, a tool to help him find the saint seed. So hubby has found out. Yi Qing smiled like a young girl. Then why did hubby still barge in like an idiot? Wouldn't it have been better to hide far away with the saint seed? But I wanted to see you. Guhan sighed. If I did not jump into the trap, how could I see you? Hubby. Yi Qing was extremely touched. She caressed Guhan's face with her hands, wanting to say something. However, she choked for a long time and did not say what she wanted to say. She only looked at the surrounding air that had turned orange-red. For the air to turn this color, it meant that the air was burning. The temperature outside of the large green flowerfish was probably over 5,000 degrees Celsius. More importantly, the green flowerfish's swimming speed was decreasing. If the green flowerfish was a speeding sports car at the beginning, then it was at most a motorcycle now. It would not take long for the green flowerfish to stop. When that happened, it would be the end of Guhan and Yi Qing. What's going on? Guhan's face was filled with doubt. Although I guessed that this Zhetien Jendi is fake, I still don't know anything else. Who is this fake Zhetien Jendi? What happened between you two? I'm sorry, hubby. There are some things I can't tell you. Otherwise, the future won't be the real future, Yi Qing said helplessly. The future. Guhan's movement paused for a moment. He asked a question that had been lingering in his mind for a long time. Did we know each other in the past or in the future? Or will I return to the past one day in the future and meet you? This guess had been brewing in Guhan's mind for a long time. Combining everything that happened every time he met Yi Qing and Yi Qing's amazing prediction ability, Guhan could not help but suspect and guess that he would return to the past through the space-time tunnel one day in the future. Just like the beginning of the heroes begin at the end dungeon, he met Yi Qing 700 years ago. In fact, in Guhan's mind, this guess could no longer be called a guess. Guhan was almost 90% sure that he would return to the past in the future. It's not like that. Unexpectedly, Yi Qing denied it directly. She shook her head. Hubby, you've always been smart. How could you not know that the future is always unpredictable? A future that you haven't seen with your own eyes is not the future. Hubby, don't think too much about it. When the future becomes the present, all the answers will appear on their own. Yi Qing's words were very confusing. Even Guhan could not understand the meaning of Yi Qing's words. However, Guhan knew that he would not be able to get the answer from Yi Qing. Then what's going on? Who is this fake Zhetien Jendi? Why did he do this to you? Guhan decided to first clarify the matter of the fake Zhetien Jendi. He's not fake. He did not expect Yi Qing to answer like this. He is the real Zhetien Jendi. Zhetien was originally named by him. My real emperor title is not Zhetien Jendi, but Sai of Cold Jendi. From a certain point of view, he is the real Zhetien Jendi, and I am the fake Zhetien Jendi. He did not expect Yi Qing to give such an answer to Guhan. Sai of Cold Jendi. No matter how stupid Guhan was, he could still understand. The so-called Sai of Cold Jendi meant that she missed Guhan. Yi Qing, this silly girl, actually planned to put her longing for Guhan in the emperor title. What did Guhan do to deserve such love from Yi Qing? Chapter 734. My relationship with Zetian is very strange. Due to some special reasons, I have to use the same identity as Zetian, and I have to do everything with him. In reality, we're like conjoined twins, sharing the same organs. We can't be separated, or we'll both die. Yi Qing explained her relationship with Zetian Jendi to Guhan, but it was clear that she was still hiding many things from Guhan. She chose not to talk about the most important information, only telling Guhan what she was willing to let Guhan know. Actually, Zetian's original intentions weren't bad. It's just that his ideals were different from mine. He was unscrupulous when it came to doing things. He could sacrifice many lives for his own goals. At this point, Yi Qing sighed deeply. Later on, the differences between us got bigger and bigger, and the hatred between us got deeper and deeper. In the end, he didn't care about the bond between us. In the end, he decided to kill me and become the real sky-shrouding sword emperor. During that damned period, I couldn't hide many things from him, so he knew many of my secrets and knew of your existence. However, he didn't know about you. He only knew that you were the person I loved the most. If I had you in my hands, I would have to listen to him. Later on, we had to fight a great battle against the Heavenly Court. This battle concerned the future of humanity, as well as one of his ultimate goals. That's why I didn't suspect him at all. I never expected him to plot against me behind my back. As he spoke, Yi Qing's hand clenched into a fist, as if he wanted to punch Zetian with all his might. However, he underestimated my strength. I fought back at the last moment, and Yuantu's Avici twin swords were broken in that battle. However, he still won in the end. I was captured and imprisoned by him, and I've only met my husband now. Although he won, Yuantu's Avici twin swords were broken. He can't even be considered an immortal sword wielder. Furthermore, he has offended many people, especially the Yangjing city. There are countless people who want him dead. If it weren't for the Liu Nian clan suppressing him, he would have died long ago. People like him can't accept such a situation, so he has to find a way to repair the broken Yuantu and Avici swords. If you want to repair the Arch sword, you must find the worldly furnace and the saint seed. Everyone in Jendi knows the location of the furnace of heaven and earth, but no one knows where the sage seed is. As I said before, he knows some of my secrets, including the secret of the sage seed. He knows that I have a sage seed, but he doesn't know where it is hidden. Therefore, he began to torture me in various ways, wanting to force me to tell him about the sage seed. He has underestimated Qing'er too much. Since Qing'er could become Jendi, how could she succumb to a little pain? In the end, he gave up on interrogating Qing'er and shifted his target to my husband. He believed that as long as he could capture my husband, he would definitely be able to use your life to force out information about the sage seed. But he has only heard of my husband's name. He doesn't know anything else about you. However, he knows that Isai's and the others have interacted with you for a period of time. That's why he shifted his target to Isai's and the others. Husband, please don't blame Isai's and the others. At first, they were as loyal and unyielding as Qing'er, but when Zetian used Anubiz's life to force them, they had no other choice. Fortunately, you erased most of their memories before you left Qing'er. They only remember that you are from Yuzhong City, and that you will only appear after Yuzhong City appears. Zetian doesn't know anything about Yuzhong City, because there is no such city in this world. However, Zetian is very knowledgeable and knows that Yuzhong used to be an ancient name for NC City. He suspects that you are hiding near NC City, so he dug 3 feet into the ground to find you. At this point, Yi Qing seemed to think of something funny and laughed happily. Of course, Zetian's digging 3 feet into the ground couldn't be hidden from the people of Yangjing City, so he simply announced to the public that he wanted to build the second headquarter city in China, and named it Yuzhong City. Everyone believed it. They all thought that Zetian wanted to make up for his regret of falling from Jendi, so he wanted to use Yuzhong City to deeply carve his name in history, so that he could become a true Jendi. Wait. You mean, The reason why Zetian Jendi built Yuzhong City was to find me? Gu Han asked incredulously. He had always thought that Yuzhong City was built by Yi Qing. But he never thought that in the end, the source of Yuzhong City's founding was him. It was Zetian Jendi who built Yuzhong City to find him. The beginning of Yuzhong City was just a lie. Yuzhong City was actually a city built on a lie. Husband, don't you think it's ridiculous? Yi Qing laughed again. In fact, this is a wonderful fate. It is like a low-quality online novel, arbitrarily altered by an invisible pen and an inaudible voice. We are just the pen's playthings. In fact, before you came, he was already very annoyed yesterday. Staying here day after day made his mind close to a state of collapse. If you had appeared a few days later, perhaps this lie would have collapsed on its own. Yesterday, he didn't know my husband at all. He had never seen my husband's face or seen his photo. He didn't even know my husband's name. Therefore, when his husband first appeared in front of him, he thought that his husband was just an ordinary sword wielder. Number 40 to 50 on the mission list was to repair the UN2 and Avici twin swords. He randomly found 10 missions that were impossible for you to complete, so that you would never be able to complete this mission. At this point, Yi Qing revealed a bitter smile. However, no one expected that Lord Husband was once Anubis' master. Anubis could not refuse Lord Husband's orders. Moreover, Anubis happened to know that the key to repairing the UN2 and Avici twin swords was the sage seed. Coincidentally, the sage seed was hidden in Qing-Er's stomach, so he had to spit out the white dwarf key. So, Anubis wanted to escape and tried to escape to resist my orders, right? Hearing Yi Qing's words, Gu Han also understood the coincidence. But why did Bastet appear? There was no need for him to appear. That was because of my orders. Yi Qing smiled bitterly. Zetian thought that he had completely trapped me, but he did not know that because Bastet's divinity was in my hands, he could secretly communicate with me through the divinity. When he reported the news of your appearance to me, I decided to make the best of it and let the sage seed be in your hands. That way, we would still have a chance of survival. But why are the steps for mission numbers 40 to 50 written so clearly on this mission list? Gu Han took out the yellowing mission list. Just as he asked the question, he immediately slapped his head hard and came to a sudden realization. I understand now. Actually, when I first appeared in front of Bastet, you had already made up your mind to do this. So, when I passed this mission list to Bastet, Bastet had already modified it. The mission for the big blue flowerfish and the missions for number 40 to 50 were all modified by Bastet, right? That's why this mission mysteriously ended at number 46, and there was not a single word on number 47 to 50. No. It wasn't modified later, it was always like this. Yi Qing revealed a sly smile. Bastet pretended to betray me. When my husband completed the Anubis mission, he had already revealed the half-truth to Zetian. He told Zetian that the sage seed was hidden in my husband's house, and that the key was hidden in Anubis' stomach. My husband's personality is as unyielding as mine, so he could not force him through torture. He could only use the mission to lure my husband into taking out the sage seed. I see. No wonder Zetian Jendi would wait for me here at the furnace of heaven and earth. At this point, the plot behind the dungeon was completely revealed. Zetian and Yi Qing had been toying with each other. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. In the end, all of this had fallen into Yi Qing's trap. But Qing-Er, why did you do this? Gu Han looked at the big blue and white fish above him. At this moment, the speed of the big blue and white fish had decreased from the speed of a sports car to the speed of a bicycle. Moreover, the amount of crystalline powder falling from its body was also decreasing, and Ji Yu Han could even feel the temperature around him continuing to rise. This meant that the big blue and white fish's cooling protection was about to disappear. At this moment, the air outside the big blue and white fish's protective barrier had turned orange-red, and the entire air was burning. The temperature inside the furnace of heaven and earth was probably over 20,000 degrees Celsius. As soon as the big blue and white fish's protective barrier disappeared, Gu Han and Yi Qing would instantly turn into a pile of ashes. That was why Guhan could not understand why Yi Qing's plan was to put both of them in such a dangerous situation. To repair the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords, not only does she need the furnace of heaven and earth and the sage seed, she also needs to fulfill a condition. Yi Qing suddenly said. What condition? Guhan asked subconsciously. The soul. The soul of the Yuan-Tu and Avici swords wielder, Yi Qing said with a smile. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.